Chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we were just before the break, I was talking about government's strategy, and I was going on to say that an important component of the government's strategy for improving the fiscal situation and increasing fiscal space, as mentioned in the speech from the throne, is our sustained focus on revenue administration reform. Ongoing revenue modernization initiatives, targeted improvements in tax compliance, which is essential to protecting the existing yields and also promoting greater tax efficiency and fairness. Mr. Speaker, I take this minute just to acknowledge that in Grand Bahama yesterday there was a press conference or protest of sorts by several small business persons, particularly among the courier sector. I want them to know, Mr. Speaker, that my office is always open to them. And, I am somewhat disappointed that they would have taken the step that they did without having given me the opportunity to speak to them. But be that as it may, I have contacted one of the speakers and advised them that I will be in Grand Bahama tomorrow, and I'm hoping to be able to meet with them in the morning so that we can have a clearing of the air, if you will, and we can understand each other as to the issues and concerns that affect them and the reasons for taking the actions that we have had to take. Again, Mr. Speaker, it's all about fairness and equity. We are not interested in putting any further burdens on the business community of Grand Bahama. Lord knows, we know how difficult and stressed that community is. And so that is not the aim at all. And to the extent that we can do what we need to do without having to place additional burden, certainly we are interested to hear what they have to say. But by the same token, they too have to understand that we have to be disciplined about what we do. We have to be transparent about what we do. And we as the government, chief revenue collections agency and protectors of the government's purse, we have to ensure that we do our job according to the law. And that's all that we seek to do, to follow the law to the extent of the law, and nothing more and nothing less. To the extent that they want to talk about concessions and other adjustments, we can talk about that. However, we have to frame that in a way where we consider the entire Bahamas. We consider all of the factors that go into granting concessions and how that affects other knock-on businesses and the whole business environment. And so we want to be careful about that. And certainly any concessions that we are going to give are going to have to accord with the law, or we're going to have to come back to this House and seek approval of Parliament to make any adjustments to the law. And so I just want to say that, again, and to reiterate, that there's no attempt from this minister, there's no attempt from the Member of Parliament for East Grand Bahama, and certainly no attempt on the behalf of this government to place any additional or unfair burden on the business community of Grand Bahama. All we ask is that everybody live up to their side of the business relationship, and everything should be fine. And I know that there's some adjustments during this period as businesses get used to a more formal and strict enforcement of the law. But if we all stay the course, if we're all respectful to one another, I'm sure that at the end of the day, we will all benefit from a system that is predictable, that is well organized and well managed. So hopefully we will see most of those persons out there who were out there yesterday tomorrow, and we're able to allay some of their fears. Mr. Speaker, our initiatives do not stop with ensuring greater compliance and discipline in fiscal matters, but also extends to setting right concerns that are of a more structural nature. We're seeking to make strides in business facilitation, tackling inefficiencies, and advancing growth promotion activities. Here, the recent appointment of the Joint Private-Public Sector Ease of Doing Business Committee is tasked with making recommendations on measures to enhance efficiency, accessibility, and cost-effectiveness in the way business is conducted in the Bahamas. Since taking office, I've had many complaints in relation to matters at the Department of Inland Revenue and the Value-Added Tax Department in particular. And we will remove the bottlenecks identified that hamper and frustrate the public and clear the long backlog of complex, unattended to tax matters. In the area of growth initiatives, the government's focus remains on encouraging and attracting strategic investments and supporting private sector developments. Mr. Speaker, my ministry, working in conjunction with the University of the Bahamas, is committed to the introduction of the Small Business Development Center to encourage and support small and medium-sized startups. We want to encourage ownership and Bahamian wealth creation. We believe in the creativity and innovative capacity of Bahamians, and this center will provide those enterprising Bahamians physical, financial, and development support as they take their ideas from conception to success. We will place a premium on innovative ideas geared towards new industries and concepts that can provide import substitution and open export markets as we try to reduce our trade imbalance. A big goal, yes, Mr. Speaker, but we have to start. Already the Grand Bahama component of this project is off the ground with the introduction of a training program for honey production, a multi-million-dollar import item that young Bahamians will be set up to do. The Bahamas Development Bank, the Joint Venture Capital Fund, training programs at BAIC, youth empowerment programs, Bank of the Bahamas, and other financial entities will all be a part of this initiative to offer seamless and tangible advice and support. We hope to have an official launch of the Small Business Development Center in Nassau in early January 2018. Mr. Speaker, moving to the Development Bank, time is running out on me, so I'll have to talk about this in more detail later on. But I do want to signal that the Bahamas Development Bank is being restructured with an aim to making it self-sufficient and to freeing up some capital so that they can reinvest in the community through the empowerment of development proposals. We want to make sure that we have in place the controls, that we have in place the right management and structure to ensure that that institution removes itself as another burden on the public purse. Delinquent loans, we want to encourage all of those persons out there who have delinquent loans with the Bahamas Development Bank to please go in and make some arrangements. We have no interest, again, in forcing businesses out of business or to take away businesses. But we have an obligation to the Bahamian people, the wider Bahamian people, to ensure that the Bahamas Development Bank fulfills its mandate and while remaining viable so that other Bahamians can also benefit in a similar manner. So if you have an outstanding balance, go and see the offices at the Bahamas Development Bank, and they will help you to bring your situation current. The bank currently receives about $3 million in support of its bond interest. We intend, and the bank has been told, within 3 years, the government of the Bahamas will cease that support. They will have to be self-sufficient. And so again, the onus is upon them to ensure that they perform. Mr. Speaker, I wanted to talk about the Bank of the Bahamas and the last transaction we did in order to help support that bank. Again, the matters that are related to the Bank of the Bahamas are complex, and it will take certainly a little bit longer than the time that I have in order to go through it. And so I'm going to leave that. I'll come back at some point and do a member statement, I guess, because I want to walk through that transaction for the Bahamian people so that they understand the choices that were before the government as the majority stakeholder in that bank, the items or issues that are at risk for the Bahamian people that informed our decision as to take the action that we did in order to support the institution. I believe in the Bank of the Bahamas. I believe in the board of directors and the management of the Bank of the Bahamas. I believe that given an opportunity to be successful, that they will prove that the Bahamian people and managers are capable, and they will be able to produce results and create value for the shareholders of Bank of the Bahamas and value to the wider Bahamas society through innovative and creative financial products to help them secure their lives and their future. And so I'll come back to that at some later point. We are very much getting the loans under control, as you are aware. We would have transferred a lot of the old non-performing loans from the Bank of the Bahamas to Bahamas Resolve in a second transaction. A lot of those loans should have been included in the first rescue package, because having kept them on the books of the Bank of the Bahamas and having had them continue to be non-performing, dragged down all of the prudential ratios of the bank and really put it in a very untenable position. It is unfortunate the way that it was done and why it was done, or I shouldn't say why it appeared to have been done. It might have been one or two untouchables, I don't know. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that it was not operating optimally, and the rescue package was half-hearted, and so while it helped, it certainly did not relieve the issues that attended to the bank. We think now with this latest transaction that we will have freed up the bank sufficiently enough that it will be able to go forward with strength. I just want to say to my constituents in East Grand Bahama how uniquely special they are to me. They know that I love them and that they have my support, and they have trusted me for the last 6 years, for which I am grateful. The relationship that we have is much more important now than it has ever been, because having the assignment that I have, that the Prime Minister has given me, it requires that I'm in Nassau more than I'm in Freeport these days. And so that trusting relationship that we have has to be tested and extended a little bit more. And I want them to know that even in my absence, that they are always in my conscience, and I'm always working towards their welfare and creating opportunities for them. Cabinet will tell you that not a day goes by when we don't talk about Grand Bahama and what we need to do to support Grand Bahama. We hear the demands for jobs and home repairs, and we feel the pain of those who have suffered as a result of the victimization in the last administration. They can rest assured, all Grand Bahamians can rest assured, that we will work for all Bahamians, all Grand Bahamians, and yes, it is the people's time. I realize that local government budgets in both East Grand Bahama and my twin West Grand Bahama, who's not there, as well as many of the family islands in particular, is inadequate. You know, people don't understand that family islands have a unique need because they are, to a large extent, out of the eye of the majority of the population. And so when you allocate resources according to population, you are not necessarily fulfilling the needs, the actual needs that exist, because the development really needs to happen, and the support is needed in those family islands and remote areas. And so the Minister for Local Government isn't here, but I certainly intend to have a conversation with him as we look towards the next budget to see how we can better align and ensure that we are giving the resources where they are most needed to support development and to facilitate development of an economy. You like that? Mr. Speaker, of course, we've done all of the back-to-school programs, the John Canoe summer program that we have, the summer school program that we had, which was very successful, and I want to thank the teachers who volunteered for that back-to-school camp, or that summer school camp. A fantastic learning experience for the kids, and certainly something we will make a feature of every summer. We've had other social functions, and of course we've had our constituency meetings. We'll be having a constituency meeting in High Rock tonight at 7 p.m. I certainly want to encourage all of the residents of East Grand Bahama, particularly those east of the missile base, to come out and let us share with each other what's happening in the constituency and what's happening in Grand Bahama and in the country in general. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the government remains optimistic about its policy agenda and has clearly set out on the right path towards establishing a track record of policy credibility. Policy credibility. And that's a big word for me. You must be credible, no matter how bad the news is. You must be able to stand with integrity and credibility, because otherwise you have no foundation. A record of frankness, transparency, and accountability to the Bahamian people and external agencies in the face of criticism by the side opposite proved successful and the correct thing to do. The PLP was wrong then, and they are wrong now. Exuma, you know it. The ratings stability shows it. And as I said before, don't let the PLP use you. They mean you no good, Exuma. Ask the one-time so-called next generation leaders. They blew in on a stale breeze in 2012, and they blew out in 2017 on the same. Today, a new era of fiscal responsibility is upon us, and we must not sacrifice or squander this moment to make a real difference in the lives of the Bahamian people and our nation as a whole. We must hold the line, colleagues, and make sacrifices for the long term. May God continue to favor our Governor General, our Prime Minister, and our administration with wisdom, transparency, courage to make bold decisions that positively impacts the lives and future of our people. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand on 3327F, and I didn't wish to further interrupt the member, the minister, as he ventured to talk about job creation and economic development, subject I wanted to hear more about. But I wanted to clarify this notion of the notion that he has, that the opposition, and me in particular, is suggesting that he tell a mistruth with respect to the economy. When it comes to...
Honourable member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Are you referring to
something
that you said
yes.
in your speech?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, carry on, member.
So when it comes to the issue of transparency, accountability, and credibility, I take it very seriously. So when I talk about not talking down the economy, I talk both about the expense side, but also the revenue side, Mr. Speaker. This is clarity on something I said that was clearly misunderstood. Further, Mr. Speaker, I'm not anticipating a response in the issue, but the Public Accounts Committee made certain requests, and I would encourage the minister to provide that information in the spirit of transparency, accountability, and credibility. Because in reality, Mr. Speaker, there is an unease about what the deficit truly is. And when we hear an explanation from the minister, we don't have the inside information on what's happening in the Ministry of Finance, me particularly having not been there myself. So when we request information so that we understand the details in the fullness of transparency and accountability, I invite the minister to not defy the requests of the PAC, but to submit, Mr. Speaker. In 5 years' time, I don't want to say I didn't know when we become the government, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I take the PAC very seriously.
Yes, the chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Anne's.
It's a pity that the member for Exuma stood on that point. As a former chairman of PAC, I sat over there and was told by the fellow who sat here, who didn't make it this last time round, got beaten by some 4 votes or whatever, that only, that he called me all kind of names like I didn't know what I'm talking about, only documents for government agencies that have been tabled on the House of Assembly have been laid on the House of Assembly, could go to the PAC, full stop, no more argument, be quiet, young man, go sit down. No, you've got to believe also in what your fellas made us do. So what was good for the goose is good for the gander.
The chair recognizes.
Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member for East Grand Bahama has no difficulty in being transparent and forthcoming with the Public Accounts Committee. I served on the Public Accounts Committee, and I could attest to what St. Anne's is saying. You would remember, you might recall, that the then government, quite frankly, I think unconstitutionally, shut down the entire Public Accounts Committee on this point. Shut it down. Right? Because they didn't want to share legitimate information that the Auditor General had already audited, finished. They didn't want the later documents so we wouldn't have access to it, Mr. Speaker. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to once again, demonstrate to the member that we on this side, uniquely different than the PLP. And I'm going to do that through a committee that's called the Treasury Committee, with which he's a member. And so I'm going to cause that committee to be formed and established so we can have a look at this. Because I want your input, you know. I think that you're a brilliant young man, like me. I want your input. You have something to offer. And so we're going to share. I have nothing to hide. The Ministry of Finance, the government of the Bahamas, works for you. And there is nothing outside of matters of national security or matters of finance that may cause some unfair advantage or disadvantage or some national interest, public interest, that I'm not willing to share. Nothing. And so we will cause that to be done. But the Public Accounts Committee, for the record, has no right, none, to ask for the information that they've asked for. And particularly, you can't ask the Ministry of Finance to support a statement of a projection that the minister utters in a debate.
No.
It's just airy-fairy. So we will talk. I will make sure that committee is established, and we will share with you what the information that we have from the public treasury. No problem. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Sorry. I did indicate that I was going to table some documents, and I want to just do that now with respect to the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility.
Order that the documents be brought up.
Sorry? Oh, yes, sorry. No, I don't. Mr. Speaker, if I may also take this opportunity, with your indulgence, to lay on the table of the House a declaration of exigency order with respect to the fishing industry as a result of the Hurricane Irma. Mr. Speaker, this declaration of exigency, whereas the Minister of Finance on the 27th day of September 2017, pursuant to the provisions of Tariff Code 9817.0000 of Chapter 98 of the First Schedule to the Tariff Act, hereby declares the following exigencies to be an exigency which qualifies for the purpose of the exemptions permitted under the said Item 9, namely, the urgent need for goods specified in the schedule hereof, which the Minister has satisfied are intended for the relief of persons in the islands of the Bahamas who engaged in the fishing industry and have suffered hardship or loss as a result of Hurricane Irma, and whose claims application in respect of such goods are certified by the Director of the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. And whereas the Minister of Finance further declares that the importation of the goods under the provision of the said Item 9 are permitted for a period of 180 days, commencing from the 27th day of September 2017 and ending the 26th day of March 2018, or for such further period as the Minister of Finance may specify by notice. Scheduled goods, materials used for the construction of fishing traps and condos. Customs duty and VAT exemption will be granted on acquisitions by individuals whose loss by Hurricane Irma have been verified by NEMA and on donations to registered charitable organizations. All other authorized donations will be deemed a gift to the government and will be received and distributed by NEMA. Any person who knowingly imports any goods pursuant to this declaration, but for a purpose other than is specifically provided for under this declaration, commits an offense and is liable to punishment in accordance with Section 268 and 292 of the Custom Management Act, dated the 27th day of September 2017, Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order that the documents to lie on the table. There are 4 documents: the Declaration of Exigency, the CCRIF documents, the explanatory note on Hurricane Matthew with respect to the Bahamas from September 19, 2017, Tropical Cyclone Matthew, model loss as if, policy, payment report, triggering events, the Bahamas, and the statement from the CCRIF regarding the Bahamas, September 19, 2017. Order that the documents to lie on the table. As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, and his mercies endureth forever. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I would like to take this time to acknowledge the Almighty God, who is responsible for me being here today. The road to this honorable house was not an easy road, but it has given me the resolve to keep fighting for my family and my country. For this country does not belong to us. This is God's country. It is by the grace of God that I'm here today, for it is in him I live and have my being. Mr. Speaker, it is with great pride that I rise on behalf of the great people of the Michael constituency, who elected me to serve as their member of Parliament. Also, I wish to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert A. Minnis, for appointing me as the Executive Chairman of the Bahamas Agriculture Industrial Corporation. And with the help of God, I will serve with excellence and integrity. It's a new day at BAIC. The management and staff are excited, and the country can expect great things from the corporation. Honorable Prime Minister, an honorable member for Bambootown constituency, the management and staff at the corporation, we will do our best to support the government in that which we have been mandated to do. Mr. Speaker, I stand on the promises and grace of God with a thankful spirit. The resilient and wonderful people of Michael constituency join me in thanking Her Excellency Dame Marguerite Penlin, Governor General, for her most gracious speech from the throne on Wednesday, May 24, 2017. Mr. Speaker, like Job, we can say, for the things which we fear came on us. That which we were afraid of came to us, end quote. Mr. Speaker, I speak of Hurricane Irma. On page 15 of the speech from the throne, it states, My government will continue to provide assistance to those adversely impacted by Hurricane Matthew. Special focus will be given to the construction of new homes and for those persons who meet the requirement. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, there are many people throughout the Bahamas who are still in need of some assistance with their homes as a result of Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma. Mr. Speaker, the people of Michael are courageous, strong, and we will rise above all obstacles. All we are asking for is to be given the resources from the central government that we are entitled to as Bahamians. All we are asking for is to be given the resources from central government that we are entitled to as Bahamians.
Speak.
Mr. Speaker, Michael support our government for extending its support to the country of Dominica, whose island was devastated as the result of Hurricane Irma. I believe in the words from the Epistle of John, but whosoever has the world goods and sees his brother in need and close his heart of compassion against him, how dwell the love of God remain in him? Mr. Speaker, I believe what we make happen for others, God will make happen for us and for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. The people of Michael constituency know that it is a little more than 4 months since this caring, passionate government came into power. The speech from the throne, page 10 states, my government will renew the Family Island Incentive Act to promote and grow horticulture, manufacturing, support diversification and growth of horticulture products among Family Islands, and encourage and enhance inter-island trade. Mr. Speaker, God knows that this is needed desperately in the Michael constituency. We are waiting patiently, but while we wait, we are prepared to do all that's within our powers to work together as a community to assist ourselves. The book of Proverbs reminds us, he who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Mr. Speaker, the people of Michael have great faith in me and our government.
Amen.
Although there are some who are discouraged and feel that the road is too long for them to see tangible relief. However, I am constantly encouraging them that although times are hard and the road seems long, our government is working on their behalf, and they will see the manifestation of these efforts. In short order, they will see it, feel it, and touch it.
Stay tuned.
Mr. Speaker, the people of Michael express daily the magnitude of untapped resources that exist within their islands. They are waiting patiently for my government's promotion of diversification, exploration, and development of tourism, banking, and Bahamian ownership of these industries. Mr. Speaker, we're not asking for much. We're only asking for the equal treatment that my constituents deserves.
Well, Family Island fellas on one accord.
Mr. Speaker, As you and the honorable members of this House know, Hurricane Irma has seriously affected some of the islands in the Michael constituency, particularly Inagua, Salina Point Acklins, and Megona. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Hubert A. Minnis, and his team for the vision, compassion, and love shown to our people during Hurricane Irma. The Bible states, where there's no vision, the people perish. Mr. Speaker, it was vision, passion that caused the evacuation of the people from Michael and other constituencies. What would have been their fate if it had not been done? I do not wish to even think about it. Mr. Speaker, I also want to thank Mr. Adley and his team at the New Providence Community Center for the compassion, care, and love demonstrated to the people of Salina Point Acklins. Even after those people were transferred to another center, Mr. Adley checked on them and assisted them with the necessary supplies. I also want to thank NEMA, Social Services, and our military forces for their assistance during this time. Mr. Speaker, my people were cared for, although there was some complaints. Therefore, on behalf of my people in the great constituency of Micah, I wish to say thank you to all who generously donated food, clothing, other items. Your support is greatly appreciated. On the island of Megona, there's a need for an airport terminal and repairs to the dock, which was further compromised as the result of Hurricane Irma. There's no electricity at the dock, in addition to the seawall needing urgent repairs. Betsy Bay needs a dock for the mail boat services. These residents also need medical personnel on their island. Mr. Speaker, in Inagua, repairs are needed to the all-age school, the principal's office, and the park. In fact, the island of Inagua is in desperate need of a new school. In addition, repairs are needed to the seawall, the local government office, and road repairs are desperately needed. Mr. Speaker, Crooked Island residents returned to their island, to their homes with damaged roofs. There are coastal damages to Landria Point. There's a need for the airstrip to be extended in order to accommodate airlift to the island. In addition, the dock in Landria Point repairs are also needed to the dock to accommodate their mail boat services, which is essential service for the livelihood of these residents. Salina Point Acklins was hit hardest by Hurricane Irma. Many residents there are in need of total repairs to their homes. The school, the dock are in desperate need of urgent attention. The water on the island, as we speak, is not safe for drinking purposes. They are in need of medical personnel also on that island. Long Key, like the other islands, need repairs to homes and dock, and there is a need for teachers on that island. Mr. Speaker, let me reiterate, we are not asking for much. Simply for the same opportunities that other Bahamians are afforded in New Providence and other islands. Mr. Speaker, the rebuilding process has begun, and the people of Inagua and Salina Point Acklins need great help with rebuilding their homes and their communities. We will continue to look towards the hills.
Wind's coming. We can look to New
If
Providence.
I suggest that our government presently is our hill, we would look towards the hill.
There you go.
From whence cometh all of our help?
All right, West Grand Bahama.
For our help cometh from the Lord, which made the heavens and the earth. Because we know that with him and with the helping hand, nothing is impossible. Though he slay my calf, we will continue to trust our God. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Governor General for her gracious speech. And you, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for your vision. This is a new day in this honorable House of Parliament. In my conclusion, Mr. Speaker, going forward, I want to encourage my government, our Prime Minister, to stay focused. Don't be distracted.
Yes.
Keep our eyes on the prize. For as we progress, we have to be careful and mindful of the distraction that will detour us and to cause a delay in us becoming very, very effective. And to serve the people whom have elected us, and to make it known that truly this is the people's time.
Amen.
In Paul's writing to the Philippians, but I will somewhat digress, and Paul writing to my government, supposition 3:13 and 14, brethren, I account not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I'm saying to my government, my honorable members, forget those things which are behind. Reach forward unto those things which are before. We press. We press. In spite of it all, in spite of the distraction, we will continue to press towards the mark for the prize. And not just for the prize, but because we have been called to a higher calling. We must understand that where much is given, much is required. The game is over, and no more jokes. We have a nation to build. We have an assignment that we must fulfill. Our mandate, we must not be wavered. We must not be stagnated. But we must keep our eyes on the prize. Don't worry about the noise in the market. Don't worry about the naysayers. But it's time to keep our eyes on the prize. Because 5 years comes really quick. God bless you, Mr. Speaker. God bless you, honorable members. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And remember, hard times don't last, but tough people do. This too shall pass.
Michael.
Thank you, honorable member. You make true the statement of Jesus that a man cannot be separated from himself. As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Baines and Grantstown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a privilege to stand here today on behalf of the great people of Baines and Grantstown, expressing gratitude on their behalf to Her Excellency Dame Margaret Penland, Governor General of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for delivering the speech from the throne with her signature grace and poise. Mr. Speaker, the community of Baines and Grantstown and I are fired up and ready to go.
Oh, yeah.
Permit me now, Mr. Speaker, to get down to business on their behalf. Just 2 weeks after the Free National Movement's sweeping electoral victory, Dame Margaret laid out the government's agenda for the next 5 years clearly and in full detail. It feels like ages ago now, but amidst the new legislations proposed, policy reforms, and concrete movement towards real change, there was a promise made to the people of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, that promise echoed as a consistent refrain, not just in the speech from the throne, but through the entirety of our campaign. It was the promise of inclusion of all Bahamians in governance, in our economy, and the way forward. Mr. Speaker, this promise stands in direct and stark contrast between the last administration and our own. We have seen the headlines splashed across the local dailies, Mr. Speaker. Alleged corruption and mismanagement by the PLP is not only shocking, but speaks to a culture of exclusion where only few benefited from the works of many. Mr. Speaker, it is this culture of exclusion that drove me to run in Bain and Grantstown and then to join the Free National Movement. I believe then, as I do now, Mr. Speaker, that for true and lasting reform, the kind of reform that can reroute the trajectory of our country, we must all collectively shoulder the burden of change. And as we chart a new course, 5 months in our administration, I am compelled to remind my own government of our promises made from the speech from the throne for full inclusion, ensuring that no Bahamian is left behind. Self-discipline, loyalty, and unity are critical to realizing the shared vision, Mr. Speaker, of the Bahamas, a model of good governance, industry, and the rule of law. We must act on our commitment to reform. It is critical that this administration responds to the loud, clear call for the Bahamian people to bring about anti-corruption legislation, introduce term limits for the Prime Minister, implement a recall system for unsatisfactory members of Parliament, constitute an independent electoral commission and boundaries commission, and make amendments to the Public Disclosure Act. It has been made resoundingly clear that the Bahamian people, with their vote, Mr. Speaker, have called us to restore confidence in our system of governance. Mr. Speaker, the people of Baines and Grantstown, resilient, proud, and resourceful, especially needs us to fulfill the promises we've made to them. The over-the-hill community is comprised of the most creative, entrepreneurial, resilient people in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. It is time their socio-economic conditions reflect their geniuses, reflect their values, and their unlimited capabilities, Mr. Speaker. As I engage with the people of Bain and Grantstown, I swell with pride, Mr. Speaker, listening to their questions, their ideas, and their stories, all indicative of their determination to build a better community, to build a stronger community, to build a more modern society. Mr. Speaker, these people are not looking for handouts, Mr. Speaker. What they want, Mr. Speaker, is support in creating an environment conducive to growth of opportunities. They want to be safe, Mr. Speaker, to be able to start and in some cases scale up their businesses. They want access to sanitation services, essential services like electricity and the availability of running water. Bain and Grantstown needs and deserve infrastructure of provisions of services most Bahamians consistently enjoy. You know, Mr. Speaker, it disturbs me that from 1973 to 2017, Mr. Speaker, some 44 plus years later, the people of my community are still in the same position since day one. Mr. Speaker, it is without doubt Mr. Speaker, that that is a downright injustice to the humanity and civilization of any human being, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, there are those who ask me, why am I doing so much for my community? Why am I going so fast, Mr. Speaker? But let me make this very clear, Mr. Speaker. After 44 plus years, Mr. Speaker, how much more longer must the people of my community wait for these services that many enjoy? Mr. Speaker, the longer we take, the next month we take, people are suffering. The next week we wait, people in my community are suffering. The next day we wait, people are suffering. The next minute we wait, Mr. Speaker, people are suffering. The next second we wait, people are suffering, Mr. Speaker. And so the equation is crystal clear, therefore. Politics plus people equals people over politics. Mr. Speaker, Maslow's hierarchy of needs strongly indicates that every human being wants the basic necessities of life, such as food and water and shelter. Mr. Speaker, those, may I add, are being included in the United Nations Human Development Index, in which the Bahamas is ranked number 58. The reality for Baines and Grantstown, an historical over-the-hill community, there are many individuals that require the basic necessities of life. The number of homes with running water is increasing, Mr. Speaker, but it is not enough until all enjoy those amenities and all of those outdoor toilets are totally eradicated. I've been encouraged, Mr. Speaker, by the progress we are making to transform our community. We have begun by building a strong public-private partnership with a construction company with the view to eradicate this outdoor toilet in Bain and Grantstown. As the Bahamian people are aware, a focal point of our government's agenda has been to leverage the talents and resources of the private sector for the benefit of all. Mr. Speaker, the people of Baines and Grantstown are themselves talented, and for this talent to grow, we need resources and strong institutions to support personal development. I promised during my campaign, Mr. Speaker, to create a research and technology hub for our community. We are also making strides towards fulfilling this campaign pledge, as well as providing certifications in information and communication technology and entrepreneurial and small business development. Mr. Speaker, small and medium-sized business are vital to any economy, creating jobs, introducing new markets, bringing innovation and contributing growth. They are highly adaptive, able to quickly respond to emerging trends and needs. Bain and Grantstown is a community blessed with outstanding human resource. Many of my people are ready and willing to start small business, providing employment for other members of the community, only needing a boost, Mr. Speaker, whether by seed grants, duty-free concessions, technical assistance, small-scale training, or a combination of these mechanisms, Mr. Speaker. We must meet our commitment to give assistance to Bain and Grantstown, empowering them to build their own financial futures. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, we ought to follow through on our commitment. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, we ought to follow through on our commitment. Further to this, Mr. Speaker, we ought to follow through on our commitment to create a tax-free economic zone over the hill, thereby encouraging the growth of businesses and the creation of jobs. As we all know, people are affected by their environment. We have the need for safety and security and physical comfort. To meet these needs, Mr. Speaker, we gravitate towards environments that are psychologically comfortable. An environment can encourage or discourage interaction, influence mode, and be the determinant factor in people's behavior. Every community, Mr. Speaker, is an environment. And the appearance of that environment helps to shape the perception of the community and its members. The importance of cleanliness and the appearance of order cannot be discounted. And being in Grantstown, there are numerous abandoned buildings. Much of these are ancestral land, ignored and perhaps forgotten by owners. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I call upon landowners to take care of their property and positively contribute to the community. And Mr. Speaker, let me just take this moment to make a clarion call to all those landowners and business and building owners in Bain and Grantstown who have not yet come back to develop or to do anything with their land. Let me say to them, we need you to come and clean up your land, man. We need you to come and pick up a rake, a shovel, and cutlass, or do something with your land.
Make it better.
Because it has created a health risk in our community, Mr. Speaker. And so I dare to call upon and to challenge our government, Mr. Speaker, to do one of two things. One, Mr. Speaker, I call upon our government to levy a tax on landowners and owners of buildings who have property in inner city communities like Bain and Grantstown, and their property is either undeveloped or uncultivated, and the building is dilapidated and abandoned, Mr. Speaker. I call upon us to levy a tax on them to ensure that they move swiftly to eradicate and address these challenges that the people of my community have been suffering from, Mr. Speaker. This, Mr. Speaker, is an eyesore in Bain Town, and it's a major, major health risk, Mr. Speaker, and we will no longer tolerate it. Or two, Mr. Speaker, call upon our government, therefore, to make the provisions necessary in our policies or legislation to seize such assets for persons who fall within that category, Mr. Speaker. And the government can therefore retain such land and maintain it and then utilize it or do whatever is necessary for the betterment of the people of my community. Mr. Speaker, we can committed to the establishment of a multi-purpose community center in Bain and Grantstown, which will host activities for constituents and give dedicated attention to youth and elderly people. I am certain that other townships will benefit from such centers, as the Bahamian people need and deserve safe places to socialize, access amenities, and build stronger communities. A retreat for students after school, a meeting place and space for community clubs, internet access and computer lessons, homework assistance program, a community garden, job interview preparation, a library of Bahamian literature, an archive for people and places in Bain and Grantstown preserving our history. The community of Bain and Grantstown is excited by the idea of shared space, Mr. Speaker, created with the needs of people in mind. This is what the Bahamian people need, and the reason they chose the honorable members present here today from a slate of 175 candidates. We must prove ourselves worthy of their trust, Mr. Speaker, and deliver on these promises. As a young person, I am particularly interested in creating opportunities for young people to access education and skills training, engage with one another to share ideas, to be a part of mentorship programming, and to be able to envision without hesitation and limitation the lives they want for themselves, Mr. Speaker. We need to create environments for young people to thrive and make it attractive to live here. So it is a choice, Mr. Speaker, and not a default or fallback option. And Mr. Speaker, when I think about the countless, the hundreds of my young colleagues out there, Mr. Speaker, who go off to countries abroad, Mr. Speaker, simply because their constant refrain is that they cannot find opportunities in their own country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm reminded every day to remind our government of our commitment to these people, and more specifically to our young people of our nation. This requires, among other strategies and systems, youth-specific programming. The development of our multi-purpose community center can see being in Grantstown pilot youth-focused initiatives that increase the number of small and medium businesses, increase job satisfaction, enrich communities, and instill the values of giving back to our communities, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, our progress is encouraging. But the people of being in Grantstown cannot do this alone. Many of us in this honorable House today, and many who have come before us, blossom in the soil of the over-the-hill community of being in Grantstown, and has continued to produce some of the most successful and well-known Bahamians throughout our country. And so, Mr. Speaker, I call upon our past residents and those present to come back and give a little something back to the country that you brag so much about, Mr. Speaker. I call upon the rich and the richest of the rich, Mr. Speaker, some of whom perhaps may be in here, Mr. Speaker, to come and to give back to our communities, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we need their support, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we hear time and time again about how being in Grantstown means so much to these people, and how their experiences there were formative. For many, being in Grantstown is a mythical place, a place they have left behind, a place that once was. But, Mr. Speaker, let me make it resoundingly clear that being in Grantstown is very, very real, and so are the needs of the people in my community. This is why now more than ever, I am asking for those whom being in Grantstown holds special place in their lives and in their hearts to come back and to give back. I am asking you to turn your eyes to our little community in the middle of Nassau, because we need you. We need your time, your energy, your talents, your resources. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind members of this honorable House that while some of us may leave when we adjourn to go west and go east and to their humble abode, Mr. Speaker, I go middle, I go central to a humble place called being in Grantstown, where the needs and the concerns I'm reminded of every single day. Mr. Speaker, let us find it in our deliberations, whether in Cabinet, whether in this honorable House, or wherever we may go, to ensure that we focus on the needs of the most vulnerable among us. Mr. Speaker, in my capacity as Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism and Aviation, I draw attention to the persistent need to enhance our tourism product. This industry employs more than 50% of the Bahamas' labor force and accounts for more than 60% of our gross domestic product. This is common knowledge, but must be used to drive and direct our actions. Gone are the days, Mr. Speaker, when we could depend on sun, sand, and sea to bring visitors to our shores. As noted by Her Excellency, there is a fierce competition in the regional and global market, Mr. Speaker. In addition to strong scales and airlift strategies and scaled use of social media, it is imperative that we continue to develop the tourism product. Mr. Speaker, downtown Nassau is in desperate need of revitalization, Mr. Speaker, from the appearance to entertainment and festival place. The site of the first impression of many of our visitors must be refurbished. Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to announce to this honorable House that my minister and I have already begun talks with relevant owners, and progress is on the way.
Team! Tourism team!
Mr. Speaker, the National Development Plan, Vision 2040, gives specific attention to the tourism industry, tying it to Goal 14 on the diversified economy. It identifies and addresses three major challenges to the development of a sustainable tourism sector: the decline in human capital and infrastructure, the need for a policy environment that encourages competitiveness, and the lack of innovation. It makes three significant points on the tourism economy. We need to improve visitor satisfaction and encourage their return through a modern tourism infrastructure and highly trained workforce. Focus must be put on increasing our share of a global tourism, and the sector needs to provide greater value added. We are faced with a clear challenge, Mr. Speaker. The cruise market is growing, but low value, and the higher value overnight market is stagnant. And Mr. Speaker, what that simply means, as my minister has on numerous occasions addressed, while we celebrate the 6.5 million visitors that come to our shores, Mr. Speaker, some 4 to 5 million of whom come by cruise ship, and they spend on average about $70, be more specific, about $69, versus the stayover visitors, Mr. Speaker, that come through our airport, spending in excess of about $1,500, Mr. Speaker. These are the focuses. Tremendous opportunity for innovation exists, beginning with building stronger linkages between tourism and other industries and local economies, like agriculture, sports, and culture. Our athletes, Mr. Speaker, are Olympic medalists and drafted into the NBA, WNBA, and NFL. Our artists, Mr. Speaker, from painters and sculptors to writers and filmmakers, are hosted all over the world. Their work celebrated and sought after. This is a clear indication that the same talents are national resources and can attract people to our island. Growth of the tourism industry depends heavily on our ability to differentiate our product, and this is largely dependent on recognition of our own strength and tapping into our human resources, especially those in the creative industry who are experts in niche and have niche knowledge and experience that can translate into interactive, immersive experiences. To fully capitalize on these opportunities, however, we must encourage Bahamians to scale up, go beyond the Bahama host, offering practical opportunities like foreign language classes. Mr. Speaker, the past few weeks have brought great challenge to this administration and the Bahamian people as we navigated together the physical, mental, and emotional financial toil of an active hurricane season. Mr. Speaker, from preparation to the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, we were reminded of the respect we owe to nature, the great fortune to live in this crown of jewels, and beauty, necessity, and power of community spirit. We are a people accustomed to binding together, Mr. Speaker, truly serving as our brother's keeper, as we did after Hurricane Joaquin and Matthew. The Bahamian people as individuals, families, corporate citizens, and civic organizations self-organized to raise monies and donations of essential items to assist those displaced by Hurricane Irma. Hurricane Irma has also adversely affected our major tourism marketing areas of the United States, and in particular, states of Florida and Texas. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, if discretionary income is limited, then there is limited leisure trips, and we must engage in creative ways to engage tourists and Bahamians to consider our family islands. The World Travel and Tourism Council, WTTC, is a global authority on the economic and social contribution of travel and tourism, and over the years have highlighted the direct and indirect business that make up the tourism product. The rippling effects of low tourist arrival could be felt across our nation, and the Ministry of Tourism is going where media market trends are going. Mr. Speaker, social media plays a major role in young people's existence. Therefore, we must engage in ad placements, bloggers, video bloggers, and trend followers in making the Bahamas a viable visitation. I even challenge Bahamians to come up with unique hashtags, Mr. Speaker, and share to the world our beautiful natural resources, our historical sites, our welcoming beaches and culture, using social media positively, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, just in case some of my colleagues are not familiar with the hashtag, Mr. Speaker, I encourage them to join the Free National Movement and practice using the hashtag, It's the People's Time. Though recovery efforts continue, Mr. Speaker, we are in a much better position than several Caribbean nations. It is only fitting that we consider the needs of our neighboring countries in tandem with resources available to us, and without hesitation, lend our assistance. It is a privilege to be in a position to welcome students of Dominica, any of whom would take up the government's offer and fall within the specified categories as outlined by our Prime Minister, to this archipelagic nation, rich in breathtaking beauty, hospitable people, and Christian values of which we are so proud of, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, let us be unequivocal in our communications to the Bahamian people and the people of Dominica, that the Bahamas is praying for them. We appreciate their assistance in the form of $100,000 in 2016 and look forward to a continued relationship with them as we continue the fight, along with all small island developing states, for climate action with a view of preservation of our islands under the threat of a rising sea levels. Mr. Speaker, I spent this past weekend in Jamaica at the Caribbean Youth Leadership Summit, of which I was pleased to have been invited to be the keynote speaker. Youth development leaders from across the region gathered to consider the great challenges that are before us, Mr. Speaker, beyond the incredible participation of our fellow Bahamians and the election of Bahamian Shaquille Rashad Knowles to the position of chairman of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. I realize that young people of our country and our region are vital to the work of changing our politics, our economy, and our environment, Mr. Speaker. This is a moment for all hands on deck, Mr. Speaker. Bahamians, young and old, from north to south, inner cities and out islands, and across party lands, to dig deep, Mr. Speaker, and work together to make reform a reality. Mr. Speaker, as I started out, the people of being in Grantstown, our Ministry of Tourism and Aviation is fired up and ready to go. Mr. Speaker, this is the promise at the core of the FNM's administration, the FNM government's agenda, and that is the promise that I hold fastly to. I thank the Governor General again for delivering the speech from the throne. It is indeed my prayer that God will bless this honorable House of Assembly and bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many? The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fort Charlotte.
Mr. Speaker, it is with tremendous honor that I stand here today on behalf of the great people and community of Fort Charlotte. It is also a tremendous honor, Mr. Speaker, that I'm able to stand here on behalf on their behalf to say thank you and show our gratitude and appreciation to Her Excellency, the Governor General, for her graciousness in delivering the speech from the throne at the opening of this historic Parliament. Since that occasion, Mr. Speaker, I have had several opportunities to interact with Her Excellency. And the essence of my interactions is summed up best by poet Steve Curtis when he says, "She walks in beauty and in grace. No harsh words pass her lips. Her smile lights up every room. With her presence she does grace. Only truth shall she speak, blessed with wisdom of words. And throughout this life she walks in beauty and grace." Now, there are some opposite, well, they're all gone now, who may see the timing of our government's gesture to thank the Governor General as incredibly bad form. But, Mr. Speaker, one thing I've learned in life is that thank yous are never in bad form or ill time, so long as persons have the courtesy and politeness to come back and say thank you. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member from Exuma and Ragged Island, who must have known I was going to bring regards to him, where I grew up in Fort Charlotte, they call this showing some manners. And knowing the relationship that Her Excellency has with our Prime Minister and other members of this government, I am sure that she's been thanked many times over for her gracious generosity in imparting the speech from the throne. But we in the Minister's administration are coming back to collectively and publicly say thank you. This is never in bad form or ill time, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, when I gave my maiden contribution in this House in June of this year, I did so paying respects to Trevor Thompson and the Archer family of Providence Avenue on Trevor's passing in May. If you remember, Mr. Speaker, Trevor Thompson was the young man who was gunned down in the early morning hours right outside his mother, Red Archer's home in the heart of Chippingham. Trevor's murder devastated our neighborhood. Now, on this, my second occasion to speak in this place, I once again stand sorrowfully to pay respects to and give my sincere condolences to three families from Chippingham on the tragic passing of loved ones. Three young men, Mr. Shenandoah Green, Mr. Dennis Moss, and baby Eugene Woodside, each of whom, like Trevor, was either murdered outside or inside of his mother's home in Fort Charlotte. And of the three, Mr. Speaker, I knew Shenandoah and Eugene personally. 24-year-old Shenandoah was murdered on September 19th while he sat in his vehicle with his two young daughters, less than 50 meters away from his mother's front door. He was a former student of St. Augustine's College with outstanding academic credentials. I remember when I came home sometime around 2000 and maybe 10, I was trying to assist him. He actually had a scholarship to attend Morehouse College. We were trying to get him off at that time. He was potential waiting to happen. I was fortunate to meet his mother 1 week prior to his death while I was paying a visit to the minister and parliamentary secretary at tourism. And she and I, when we met, were talking about our efforts to get him employed. And it was so sorrowful for me to have to call the employer the day after learning of his death to tell him they didn't need to put him forward anymore because he had passed away. And I was told that they had just moved his name up to call him that week to come in for a job. It was the same thing with Dennis, Mr. Speaker. I can't tell you much about his academic background like I can with Shenandoah. But he too had a tremendous amount of potential And it was always he and his friend Trey that were hanging out with some of the other fellas around Rosebud when I passed through at his car wash. Just like Shenandoah, I was trying to also help him get a job. And anytime I got a lead on something, I would WhatsApp him the information. The last time I saw him, we were leaving McDonald's in Oaksfield, and he caught a ride back home with me. We were talking about something that was taking place at Malia, but we never got a chance to help him out. Now, baby Eugene, I didn't know, but I got a chance to visit his family like I did the others. But I got a sense of baby Eugene when I visited with the kids at Aubrey Sales. I sat and watched these third graders, 8-year-olds, communicate their feelings about having lost their friend. And when I was done, Mr. Speaker, one of the little guys asked if he could pray. And I asked him if he wanted to pray. He said yes. And he prayed grown people prayers. And after watching and listening to the little third grader pray, Mr. Speaker, I could only ask myself, where are we losing them? For the most part, when I look at our young men in our elementary school system, they seem to be progressing. Despite the many challenges they face in their home and social environments, for the most part, they tend to be pretty sociable, and they tend to socialize sensibly. But somewhere in the transition from childhood to young manhood, we tend to lose them. I mentioned this to a friend of ours the other day, Mr. Speaker, that we are losing our men in great rates. And the friend pointed out to me, sir, that we're not losing them. The friend said we're killing them, literally and metaphorically. On the surface, this appears to be true. It's my hope that as we move forward as a nation, that we begin valuing and placing more value on the lives of our young men and women. And I speak specifically of those in my community of Fort Charlotte. And stop letting them slip through the cracks as if we could care less. These are our breadwinners. I would like us to remember that each bloody body wasting away on our streets is not an indictment of any one person or political party, but it is an indictment on all of us as Bahamian people. Their blood is on all of our hands because in some way, either directly or indirectly, we each play a role. It takes a village to raise a child. And these are children that we are killing. With that being said, Mr. Speaker, before I move on, I would just like this House to join me and the rest of Fort Charlotte in paying respect with a moment of silence for the 3 young men in the Green, the Moss, and the Woodside family on their tragic passing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, my colleague from Baintown, my colleague from Mycal, Family Island sometimes is no different from the inner city, express in great details the pains and concerns of many of my residents as well in Fort Charlotte. So I won't elaborate and go through that because we experience the same thing and we're looking for the same thing from our government. I will, however, say, Mr. Speaker, although strong and resilient, the people of Fort Charlotte need peace. With the shooting of young Eugene, many of the residents are realizing that they can be minding their own businesses in their own home, and they are still not safe from this violent gun culture that has taken over our country. Even when I'm driving through certain neighborhoods now, I'm mindful that I may not make it out because at any time a shot that was intended for somebody else while I'm passing through may find its way through my vehicle to me. The young man at Aubrey Sales told me that it's because of the violence that his mother doesn't let him go outside anymore. But Eugene's murder tells us that even in the sanctity of our homes, we can still become victims of gun violence. It's a pity that we have to go through these experiences, Mr. Speaker. But in all of this, there is something I do realize, and that these problems did not begin on May 10, 2017, like my colleagues opposite insinuate in their diminished show de force. And I think Bahamian people can see for themselves that this administration is working arduously and in the best interest of the Bahamian people to get these out-of-control issues under control. But here again, Mr. Speaker, is part of the issue for me. I sit and listen to the litany of criticism coming from my opposition colleagues participating in this process. They show a great deal of gumption and bravado in expressing their anxiety, distress, apprehension, and unease at the Minister administration's 4 months in office. They express feigned concern for the Bahamian people that our economy of the Bahamas is not growing fast enough in 4 months, that crime has not been stopped in 4 months, that new jobs have not miraculously appeared in 4 months, that foreign direct investors are not taking over our shores in droves in 4 short months, and that in 4 short months, Grand Bahama is not the booming second city that they could not create in 5 years that they were in office. 5 years. 5 years, Mr. Speaker. Actually 10, if you count the years from 2007 to 2002 to 2007. And where was this same gumption and bravado when they followed their fallen lead off the cliff? Where were their anxiety, distress, apprehension, and unease at the Christie administration 5 years of spinning wheels? This charter of governance offers new and innovative solutions for a wide range of challenges facing the nation and reflects the Progressive Liberal Party's belief that their government's priorities must begin with fighting crime, creating jobs, securing our borders. We believe in Bahamians. They're not here, but I'm sure they remember. Had they given us a functioning national health insurance plan in the 5 years that they had, perhaps the Free National Movement would not be here on the receiving end of their pretend anxiety. And Bahamians in the Bahamas would be a better and more healthy place. Had they provided mortgage relief in their 5-year term, perhaps the Free National Movement and Frankie Wilson would not be in this position to listen to their make-believe distress. Had they made BAMSI into the national feeding program that they said it would be, perhaps this government would not be sitting here listening to their woeful cries of dread over our first term, 4 months in office. Had any of the crime-fighting measures they fooled us into believing they could deliver on over the last 5 years worked, perhaps I would not be here lamenting the murders of Shenandoah, Dennis, or Eugene, and they would be in a better position than that of hypocritically demonizing our good Minister of National Security and our current government effort to clean up their mess. In their 5 or 10 years in office, as they had promised, had they lowered the cost of electricity, created new jobs that put Bahamians first, expanded the role of Bahamians as investors, removed impediment to doing business, created investment incentives for Bahamian, protected us from 4 downgrades, the Bahamas would be in a much better place. And perhaps they would not be sitting here today with only representation from 4. Perhaps they wouldn't be lamenting at all. But the hypocrisy of it all, Mr. Speaker, all I can say is sweep around your own doorsteps before you come sweeping round ours. Yet, Mr. Speaker, after being part of or living with the past 5 years of the Christie administration, I can only attribute the criticism now coming from the opposite side toward this administration as emanating from the trauma that they experienced while serving with or under the former leader. In psychology, they call this displacement. Mr. Speaker, The redirecting of thoughts, feelings, and impulses intended to be directed at one person or object, but taken out upon another person or object. People, Mr. Speaker, often use displacement as a defense mechanism when they cannot express their feelings in a safe manner to the person that they wish their feelings and emotions to be directed at. The classic example of this is a man who gets angry at his boss, but can't express anger at his boss for fear of being fired. So he goes home and kicks the dog and starts an argument with his wife. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, in this instance, the only justification that I can give for the side opposite's misgiving is that they are displacing their feelings about their former leader onto our current leader while denying the true source of their outrage. They, Mr. Speaker, perhaps think that our leader will somehow turn out to be like theirs.
They didn't know. They didn't know.
But I think the revelations over the last 4 months has shown that our Prime Minister serves no Perry Christie. Therefore, I ask the last standing four to relax a bit and charm their raging and hypocritical tongues and stop misleading people. Like the young people say, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just rest this here for a minute. Among other things, the member for Exuma and the Ragged Islands lamented that the Exuma International Airport is not only a national disgrace, but an impediment to further development on the island. I would like to ask the member, is it a disgrace and impediment as a result of what the Minister administration did in 4 months? Or is it so because of what the Christie administration did not do in 5 years? Or is he just displacing? He said that he is advised that the previous government left funding in place for airports in Exuma, North Eleuthera, and Bimini. He said for this government to get on with it. I asked the member again, why was the funding left? Why did his former government not just do it? Or is he just displacing? We need is his cry, Mr. Speaker. And I ask, why do you not have? You had 5 years. Or is he just displacing? The previous administration already had a plan for small and medium-sized development agencies, the member said, Mr. Speaker, and this is all they say. I agree the former administration had all sorts of plans. What they lacked, though, sir, was action. And that is a large part of the reason why they are on side opposite. In its first 4 months, Mr. Speaker, this administration has shown that it not only has plans, but actions. Even on some left behind by the former administration. The administration says it plans, this administration says it plans to rein in this out-of-control spending that the Christie administration has been on in the last 5 years. And no one can deny that we are not acting on that plan, even to the discomfort of us in Fort Charlotte and some of the family islands.
Absolutely.
And some other constituencies. As a chartered accountant, the soon-to-be deputy leader and future leader of Her Majesty Loyal's opposition knows all too well that getting one's fiscal house in order should always be the first order of business when trying to bring about stability.
There you go.
This administration said that the rule of law is critical to the maintenance of the people's trust in the exercise of public authority, and that ministers are held to the highest standard of constitutional and personal conduct, and has acted on its plan to establish the office of the Independent Director of Public Prosecution, with a compendium of anti-corruption legislation to follow in short order. So I ask them to stay tuned. This administration has brought forth legislation to make legal the illegal National Intelligence Agency that was being operated under the former administration. And whereas the former administration sought to implement the next bill in a perceived attempt to intimidate its adversaries during the run-up to a national election, this administration is bringing forth, without the cloud of a looming election, the interception of communication bill for the people's consideration. As the Attorney General says, The bill is not etched in stone, but at least it is being brought forward in considerable enough time for the people to have their ample say in its passing. And unlike the previous administration, there is nothing suspicious here in its timing. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, this administration has finally brought into force on September 5th the Bahamas Agriculture, Health and Food Safety Authority to oversee the administration and enforcement of the Food Safety and Quality Act of 2016, the Animal Health and Production Act of 2016, and the Plant Protection Act of 2016. Excuse my quickness. Mr. Speaker, this authority, of which I serve as chair, is an important effort in the coordination when it comes to putting the health and welfare of Bahamian people first and protecting them from disease and other contaminants carried by animals, plants, or products. Mr. Speaker, in the course of international trade, there is a movement of live animals and plants which have potential to spread disease and pests not ordinarily found in the Bahamas, which can cause damage to agriculture, natural habitats, and affect the health of our people. This authority has been created to strengthen procedures at ports of entry, such as airports and seaports, to ensure that notifiable diseases such as rabies and foot and mouth disease, among others, are not imported. In addition to measures at the border, surveillance programs will also be strengthened. The relatively low pest and disease status of the Bahamas depends on having these programs in place. The surveillance measures will become increasingly important as global warming threatens to spread northward the distribution of pests and disease found in countries south of the border. Mr. Speaker, the member for Exuma and the Ragged Island asks whether this administration was creating standard authorities for fun. The Standards Bureau was created not only to monitor weights and measures, but also to develop standards for a range of goods and services. BAFSA deals specifically with issues covered by the agreements of sanitary and phytosanitary measures, while the Standards Bureau deals with issues covered by the agreements on technical barriers to trade. The global food system is becoming increasingly complex, and consumers have raised questions about the safety of fresh and processed foods. In addressing these issues, there is a need for coordination and collaboration between the Standards Bureau and the Bahamas Agricultural, Health and Food Safety Authority. In fact, Mr. Speaker, in meeting with our stakeholder agencies, the coordination extends even beyond these agencies to the Department of Environmental Health and the Ministry of Health. Therefore, for the member who cried shame on this administration's effort to create another standard authority and asked whether we were creating this just for the fun of it, I cry shame and heap coals upon his head. For unlike the former administration, this administration does nothing just for the fun of it. Again, it is called coordination of efforts, not duplication of efforts. As such, I invite him to visit our office and familiarize himself more about our standards work before he speaks any further. Our doors are open. It's only been 4 months, Mr. Speaker, and our government continues to produce and plan. But planning is not impulsive, Mr. Speaker. Impulsive planning creates chaos. I'm not one to dwell much on the past, and I'm not much in favor of continually looking back and criticizing for what was done or not done in the past. But there's nothing wrong with looking at, speaking about, and learning from the past so as to ensure a better future. As incoming ministers after incoming minister has revealed, the past 5 years in this country, as we look back and ruminate, has been one big, chaotic, impulsive mess, the likes of which we are still suffering from the aftershocks. It is not a question that our country was in a free fall, and there is no question that we must get the economy growing again. But, Mr. Speaker, for members opposite to think that this can be done in 4 months after Hurricane Christy battered us mercilessly for 5 years, they must be delusional now as a result of the trauma than they were when they were promulgating their former leaders' dreams. I remind them, as revelations continue to come, that this is not really about the past 4 months of the minister's administration as much as it is about the income inequality that has been allowed to fester and grow in the wake of the former administration's rule. The extent, Mr. Speaker, to which income has been unevenly distributed among Bahamian people. While good majorities of our people were barely taking home $8,000 a month for their hard labor, others were making in the range of $28,000 plus housing allowance and bonuses a month for what amounted to no labor at all. While a good majority was out selling their souls and giving their lives for a measly $10,000 a month, a lesser minority was selling their souls and hours for $200,000 a year. Some, Mr. Speaker, see nothing wrong with this. The attitude they take, Mr. Speaker, is what is all the fuss about? The fuss is about the many residents in Fort Charlotte who continue to visit my office in distress because their roofs have still not been repaired, as promised by the past administration since the last hurricane, despite the millions of taxpayers' dollars that they took from the people like me to do the job. To my colleagues on the right, if you want to rile against something, rile against that. Where's my money? And why am I having to deal with your mess? The fuss is about many of the residents of Fort Charlotte who can barely find food to put on their tables or keep lights in their homes so that they can see the food that they can barely put on their table. With humor, they thank the 59,000 Bahamians who voted for the PLP, but the seriousness of the matter is that many of them are now flooding our offices, hoping that we could help them out of the mess the former administration created. The fuss, Mr. Speaker, is about Shenandoah Green, Dennis Marsh, Eugene Woodside, and the hundreds of young Bahamian men and women whose murdered lives some of us must carry around each day, feeling powerless to do anything about it because of the weight of those careless and haughty Bahamians who see no problem with flaunting their wealth in the faces of the poor and walking all over these, their same Bahamian brothers and sisters. This, Mr. Speaker, is not about the past 4 months of the minister's administration, because in the past 4 months, this new Prime Minister has shown that he is espoused with the decency and compassion and care as it relates to the downtrodden and the underprivileged in this country. I ask the people from our southern islands, including Ragged Island. This, Mr. Speaker, is about a nation who, after 5 years of living under the Christie administration's operation, is now operating on survival mode, where anything goes, where the people have the attitude that ain't no one looking out for me, so I got to look out for myself. And any way I can make a little cheese, I'll do it, even if it means going to the extreme of being hired to commit murder. What is the fuss about, Mr. Speaker? As I bring my contribution to close, I remind my government again of this one thing: idle hands are the devil's playground. I know that money may be tight, but let us continue to show our caring nature by placing these idle hands at the forefront of our legislative agenda. To the government and our Bahamian people, let us not be distracted and whipped into a frenzy by those who still have yet to look closely at themselves in the mirror. What is all the fuss about? But putting those things behind us, Madam Michael, let us press towards the prize. This change that we are seeking, Mr. Speaker, is going to require, like my colleague says, all hands on deck. Not just the government hands, but the hands of the people across the nation. As I paid homage to Her Excellency at the onset of the presentation, Mr. Speaker, I close by using and borrowing the words of her husband, the late Sir Lyndon Pinlin, a man whose words of wisdom are not even used by his own party anymore. And I say, Bahamians have a responsibility to our country not to let our sense of pride go to our heads. Instead, we should always use our heads to make the most of our pride of being. Independence, he said, will mean work for us all, self-reliance for us all, dignity for us all, and reward for us all. In our hands, more than mine, will rest the final success or failure of our course. Let us go forth and lead the land we love, asking God's blessing and help. But know that here on earth, God's work must be truly done. I thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is truly the people's time, and I thank you, and may God renew his favor on us and bless us and our country moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
As many?
I'm going to be deacon today.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach.
Mr. Speaker, I am obliged, sir, to you. And I stand this afternoon, sir, on the grace and generosity of the wonderful people of South Beach and signal my gratitude for their confidence in me and the Free National Movement as expressed on May the 10th, 2017. Mr. Speaker, I am privileged to serve this great community who is diverse, courageous, unselfish, and seized with a keen sense of self-initiative that makes me proud. There is so much that we have planned together for helping our underserved young people with life, educational, financial, business, and development skills to ensure their own productive futures, to further enhancing the utility and beauty of the physical environment. I make it a point, Mr. Speaker, to be in my constituency office every Thursday when I'm in town to assist those who may have a need or to learn from them how I may better serve and help fulfill their aspirations. Mr. Speaker, I also stand and extend my gratitude and appreciation to our beloved Governor General, Her Excellency Dame Marguerite Pinling, for her decorous representation in outlining this government's agenda in the speech from the throne earlier this year. Dame Marguerite was a mentor of mine during my formative years in broadcasting, where she would offer helpful tips from time to time. And at each occasion thereafter, when we now would meet, she continues to encourage me in my efforts to help the young people of our country. Mr. Speaker, we have come through the start of the new school year, where thankfully the majority of our schools were ready for opening day, September the 4th. We have had a challenge, however, with the pace and scope of repairs in a system that has now become outdated, outmoded, and simply unresponsive to the dire needs of our educational physical plant. Reality is, Mr. Speaker, that the school plant must have a program of continuous maintenance each and every day, not simply once a year during the summertime. And it is a program, sir, that my ministry is investigating and will soon advise this House on its possible application. Mr. Speaker, as Her Excellency Dame Marguerite stated in the speech from the throne, and as I said when I spoke in this honorable place during my budget sharing, one of the major thrusts of our educational reform effort is the foundation that we intend to expand upon in preschool. We know that by focusing on the cognitive development of those aged 0 to 5, we provide our children our youngest children with the tools to succeed in school and beyond. The government, therefore, is committed to refocusing on those basics that were once the cornerstone of a primary education, those such as literacy, numeracy, oracy, and cognitive skills. And additionally, Mr. Speaker, probably more importantly, we are also committed to focusing on social and emotional value training for our youngest minds, to ensure that all children have access to quality preschool programs. We are expanding on this foundational development. In keeping with this mandate, Mr. Speaker, our intention is use of technology in their classrooms. Such, our government is piloting a program their facilitators and teachers will be equipped with a tablet. It is expected that in addition to their training, that the development of digital resources would be further enhanced, Mr. Speaker, to support curriculum, teachers' knowledge, their skills, through the effective integration of ITC. It is also expected, sir, that the students' competencies in this regard will be also further enhanced. I am to advise to you, sir, that we will shortly unveil further the transformational plans that we have for education. However, on this occasion, Mr. Speaker, I wish to update this Honorable House with some good news on the programs and projects that have been brought to fruition in our educational system within just the first 4+ months of this administration. But before I do so, I wish to state that I am proud of the member for Kalani, our Prime Minister, for his magnanimous heart, his generous ethic and Christian values in extending to the people of Dominica the help that he offered. The same help that he offered, Mr. Speaker, to our own countrymen, in particular the residents of Michael, whom during his national address advised, encouraged, invited to evacuate at the expense of our government. You know, Mr. Speaker, there is a critical observation in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 20, and it states this: "For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven." I have said it elsewhere, sir, and I say it here. This Christian thing, this Christian values system that we so glibly espouse, ain't something to talk. This is something we have walked. When they asked Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 7, verse 15, "How does one know your disciples?" He stated, "By their fruits ye shall know them." Lest we forget, Mr. Speaker, we as a country have been the beneficiaries of the generosity of millions of dollars in cash and aid over the decades from foreign countries. When the two boats collided some years ago on an August Monday holiday, the U.S. was the first, not our country, on the scene. When the hurricane slammed our shores over the decades, last year, October the 6th, I remember it clearly, because it was my birthday, as it will be tomorrow. Millions of dollars, Mr. Speaker, including 100,000 from Dominica, flowed into our coffers. So, I say to our Bahamian people, be careful. Be very careful. Because as my grandmother said to me many years and many times, to but for the grace of God, maybe them today, might be, could be us tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, certain comments were made in this House that alluded, and elsewhere, that alluded to some threats being made about the dismissal of contract workers engaged in the public service, in particular, the Ministry of Education. Quite interesting. Let me state categorically, sir, and unequivocally, that I know not of, have never known, of any threat that was issued to or directed towards any contract worker by any public officer or member of the executive team of the Ministry of Education. Indeed, sir. When I arrived at the Ministry of Education on May the 15th, I was confronted with an atmosphere of confusion and enveloping despair among the members of this contracted worker group. I was approached all over this island by such members or their relatives, seeking some answer or some assistance regarding their employment. And for the record, I stated then, Mr. Speaker, I stated in my budget speech, hundreds and hundreds of contract workers were hired in the Ministry of Education in the last year in the regime of the former administration, particularly in the last 3 to 4 months before the May 10th election. I am advised that the rationale offered at the time of the hiring was that there was a need, real or perceived, for certain categories of workers. That may be so. Except, I was also advised, Mr. Speaker, that the manner of this engagement was patently unfair to the public service and to these workers. It was unfair to treat the people that way, sir, and here is why. Many of these people never had a written contract. Many, if not all, were never apprised or informed of the terms of their hiring. Many were never advised of their responsibilities or job functions. And many, if not all of them, were simply dumped onto an unaware and unprepared Ministry of Education. The ministry knew about them, but the public service never did, Mr. Speaker. So what did we do, Mr. Speaker? They talk about we threatening the people and so on. What did we do? I, along with the executive team, sir, convened a meeting of those workers on Thursday, September the 21st, at the Stapleton School, so that we could explain to them in person, not through rumors and innuendos and social media and all kinds of other gossip and nonsense and so on. Explain to them in person the nature of their engagement, what those terms were, how they would be adjudged or graded, and how, if they wished, they could become P&P. We also told them this, Mr. Speaker, that they would be required for their benefit and ours to participate in a period of training so that they could understand the obligations and responsibilities of what it means to be a public servant and the specific responsibilities to which they were assigned. Nowhere, at no time, did anyone that I know of threaten to fire anybody. What is irrefutable, Mr. Speaker, is this. The public service is bloated. The Ministry of Education staff complement is bloated. There are more engaged persons there than are needed. If we were the heartless, uncaring, and careless government that we have been described as being, many of those now engaged would have been let go when their contract ended on June the 30th. But we didn't do that. So understand this now, Mr. Speaker. They were hired in the months before the election for a contract that ended on June the 30th. They were never told that. So who now would you define, Mr. Speaker, as being heartless? uncaring, or callous. I leave that for you all to figure out. But you see, sir, they don't have to listen to rumors or any other gossip, Mr. Speaker. I told them on September the 21st, that's a Thursday. I repeat this to them now. No one is threatening you. Nobody. I certainly am not. But I offer you this piece of advice. Do your job. Cut that slackness out that I see around the Ministry of Education. Come to work on time. Stop being distracted. Have manners. Have respect. Be a member of the team. Please do your job. Because if you don't, you will be fired. You heard it here, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, they got a chance. We're not only extending them, we're training them, and we are giving them a chance. The same chance they were not given by others. I don't know who those others are. Now, Mr. Speaker, members, you know I'm a merciful man. Merciful. Members will be pleased to know, absolutely, that in August 2017, in terms of scholarships, Mr. Speaker, 126 public school graduates were recipients of international scholarships under the Public Scholars Program. The Ministry of Education has made a serious commitment to our public school students who excel, and many of them do, with more opportunities for scholarships to tertiary level institutions. A few short years ago, sir, public school students were getting less than 7% of the scholarship grant funds available. This year, the government of the Bahamas, along with 16 colleges and universities, have invested nearly $12 million in public school students in the form of scholarships for their matriculation over the next 4 years. That $12 million, sir, does not include the $5.5 million that now has been invested for those who are in the program already. There are a number of schools. I will name only a few, sir. Central State University, Florida Technical University, Anderson University, St. John's, and Taylor's. We are also increasing opportunities for deserving Bahamians to attend the University of the Bahamas here. This year, Mr. Speaker, 318 Bahamians, young students, were awarded full scholarships, and 222 received partial scholarships to attend the University of the Bahamas. 440 new students studying at the University of the Bahamas are either the recipients, Mr. Speaker, of full or partial scholarships. Further, Mr. Speaker, this year, this year, there were 15 national merit scholarships. Unprecedented. Collectively, this small group has taken more than 100 BGC examinations, earned more than 80 BGC A grades, and have been accepted at 14 colleges and universities. Places like McGill University, the University of Miami, University of Glasgow, Scotland, University of Tampa, Roger Williams University, just to name a few. Let me say this, Mr. Speaker, while I'm on my feet. We suffered in the Ministry of Education much grief over this issue of scholarship. And it is because, regrettably, Bahamians seem to think that they have an entitlement to a scholarship. An entitlement. We are going to revamp this scholarship program, and we are going to do so in concert with an education program. Let me give you an example as to what we are faced with, Mr. Speaker. This year we received over 4,000 applications for scholarships. 4,000. Unfortunately, we can only award, based on our budget, 10% of that number to a scholarship. That means, Mr. Speaker, that approximately 3,800, 3,900 students, all deserving, all wonderful in their achievements, academic and otherwise, would have to be turned away. We have to find a way to assist more of our students who need the help in furthering their university, college, educational program. We have to find a way, Mr. Speaker. And I am so proud to tell you, sir, that a lot of our students who applied for scholarships were males. Many, many of them were males. Increasing number of males. And they and for many of them, the needs that they express, sir, are needs that are critically required in our country. The funding simply isn't there. I am grateful to the many organizations and businesses that have come forward, Life with Key Foundation to name one in particular, the utility companies and others who have come forward to assist by offering scholarships to our students. And I wish to congratulate them today, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'm also happy to report that as of next Tuesday, the 10th of October, all public schools in the Bahamas will be opened, with the exception of the school in Ragged Island, which was extremely damaged by Hurricane. Additionally, sir, the repairs to the Crooked Island High School will be completed tomorrow, and it will also open on Tuesday next week. Had it not been, sir, for the discovery of mold due to leaks in the roof and the remediation that was necessary, that school would have already been opened. I am happy to report to you, Mr. Speaker, and this Honorable House, that the Salina Point Primary School, this is in Auckland, sir, opened yesterday. I am sad to report to you this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and we are finding and looking and scratching for as many different ways as we can to address this problem. And we believe that technology is going to assist us in this regard, sir. As I stand here this afternoon, sir, to speak to you, we have a shortage in our system of nearly 100 teachers, many in the critically needed, skilled areas. I'm sure you understand. STEM, science, technology, mathematics. 100. We are seeking to address this and have been successful in large measure by the provision and the engagement of supply teachers. We are working with the University of the Bahamas to do more. I am congratulating our great team led by Mrs. Donella Bodie, Director, Mr. Lionel Sands, and the wonderful people, Mr. Lewis, as we are looking at all ways to help out with this, to reform, upgrade, modernize our selection processes, and so on. I'll give you an example, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of people who are qualified in particular disciplines. For instance, my beloved colleague here and friend is a scientist. He may not have been trained as a teacher, but if he is interested in teaching science, why not engage him? Someone with a master's degree in mathematics or other very necessary disciplines, though not trained as a teacher, why not engage them? And as quickly as they possibly, especially if they're interested, Mr. Speaker, in going to a family life, especially. We are working assiduously, and I'm grateful to Mrs. Sharon Pratt-Road for helping us along with the director and his team. Again, as I said, sir, repairs are ongoing because many of the repairs have not yet been completed for a variety of reasons. Those repairs will take place after school and on weekends, now that school is resumed. We are still, however, experiencing delays in Abaco, the Patrick, Bethel, High School, I regret to have to inform my beloved brother. S.C. Boodle and Treasure Key Primary, and a few schools in Grand Bahama where the scopes of work had to be expanded in order to engage all that is required in those particular schools. The Ministry of Works inspectors are doing a gallant work in visiting those schools and revisiting those schools so that they can bring that particular matter to fruition. I am also happy, Mr. Speaker, to say that the school in Staniel Key, this has been problematic, primarily because the teacher's cottage has been in a state of disrepair. That school now, sir, I am glad to report, is opened because the teacher's cottage has been fully repaired and she now doesn't have to risk commuting by boat each day. She can live full-time on the island. One of the great joys of my ministry today, Mr. Speaker, is to report to this House of Assembly to you, sir, Stephen Dillett. You can put your hand up like this so when I come down high. Stephen Dillett, a new state-of-the-art, well, let me say it, a refurbished state-of-the-art school, Mr. Speaker, is now open. I invite members to please go to Stephen Dillett. You will absolutely be blown away. Incredible, Mr. Speaker. And I want to spend a special thank you and congratulations to my beloved senior and mentor, the Minister of Works, and his team. Mr. Speaker, I think we need to appreciate the incredible effort undertaken. This is a scope of work, $4 million, that should have taken or could normally would have taken 1 year. If you work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it will take you 7 months. Mr. Speaker, the school was ready after just 4 months. Maljak Construction, Ministry of Works, and brought it in record time, sir. Over 30 classrooms, computer lab, art room, specialized space for the PE people, for the janitresses and so on. As I said, computer, music, Mr. Speaker, 2 preschools, fully air-conditioned, and the principal and the executive team, they are able with their cameras and so on to see the entire school at one simple glance. Impressive beyond measure, sir. And I do. Barnabas. I also want to say that in the meantime, while the school was getting ready, St. Barnabas Anglican Church, Wesley Methodist Church and Hall, Community Hall, and Mabel Walker had to substitute as satellite communities for the student. I am very grateful to that, sir. And I ask, please, Mr. Maljak, that we congratulate that man, Mr. Jack Andrews, and his team of subcontractors for the extraordinary work that they have done at that school. So I'm very grateful. Now, Mr. Speaker, finally, today is National World Teachers' Day. And let us be absolutely clear. The most critical component in the delivery of education, in any educational system, is teachers. Absolutely. An education profession. Without a doubt. I wish to applaud, congratulate, and salute and honor our teachers and the phenomenal gift of themselves, way beyond the call of duty, Mr. Speaker. Many of whom do afternoon classes and weekend classes into the summertime during their holidays because of their love for teaching and the love they have for their students. Unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. If you hear the stories and you see the output, you have nothing else but eternal, endless gratitude for these people, the teachers. And I also refer to educational professionals. I start with my team at the Ministry of Education. I congratulate them, I honor them, I thank them, I praise and salute them for the awesome, awesome work up and down the system that they do on a daily basis. Many times without the help of parents, who can sometimes be one of your greatest impediments in helping their own children. Mr. Speaker, a woman cursed me out the other day and told me, a mother told me she is not going to buy no books for her 6th grade child. 6th grade child, that is on me and the principal. This is a mother. Well, I mean, yeah. They cursed Jesus, so I mean, you know. Crucified him as a matter of fact. All right? But this is what you contend with. And of course, we are not there for the parents, although we obviously want and need their assistance and support. Our commitment is to those young people in our school system so that we could be the best country on God's earth. So I congratulate and I thank and honor our teachers and education professionals, Mr. Speaker, because in all things, to God be the glory. Congratulations to them, and congratulations to the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many?
And you got the teachers. You got the teachers over there.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Fox Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the wonderful people of the great constituency of Fox Hill, who I have the distinct honor to represent in this venerable House. Mr. Speaker, on a beautiful, sun-drenched, cool day, cooled by tropical ocean breezes, our gracious and eloquent Governor General read to an eager and expectant population the speech from the throne, a veritable blueprint of help and hope. The speech from the throne represented so many things to so many hopeful Bahamians. It was a welcomed relief for the thousands and thousands of Bahamians who did not have the privilege of owning a friend's, family, and lover's passport, and thus felt left out and cut out of the Bahamian dream. The speech from the throne, Mr. Speaker, was like a drink of cool, refreshing water from the fountain of hope for those who were exhausted and shell-shocked from 5 long years of privation, financial downgrades, the tough economy, cutbacks of every type, violent crime, and record murder rates. We were, in the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., living on a lonely island in the midst of a vast and material prosperity. And so, Mr. Speaker, the speech from the throne, again quoting Dr. King, came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity, unquote. Mr. Speaker, there is one pivotal paragraph in the speech from the throne that, in my view, summarizes the entire 20 pages of the speech. It sums up the very serious problems that currently plague our problems. That's one. 2, it shows the depth of the task our government faces in order to take us out of this dark and seemingly hopeless and bottomless quagmire. And 3, it sets the foundation on which impactful and sustainable solutions can be attained. And I will quote that particular paragraph, which was so eloquently read by Her Excellency, the Governor General. My government is convinced that our transgressions in governance, our levels of crime, our levels of unemployment, our unhealthy lifestyle, our levels of social injustice, and our seeming worship of power over principles will never abate unless we begin to restore those Bahamian values that we cherished and embraced not so long ago. Mr. Speaker, we are constantly reminded in this honorable place that the elections are over and just get on with the job of governing the country. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the elections are over, and the speech from the throne sets out the blueprint for the way forward. But, Mr. Speaker, there are some who are having a very difficult time accepting that undeniable fact. The elections are over. The honorable member for Southern Shores, who yesterday admitted to having 2 passports, 3, informed this House, this honorable House, that the General Post Office is open for only half a day. So I can see where it is possible that some candidates from the May 10th general election may not have gotten the memo that the elections are indeed over and that we are indeed governing the country. Mr. Speaker, a slogan from that election campaign boldly proclaimed, and I quote, "No, sir, not this time. It's the people's time." And so we are about the people's business, Mr. Speaker. Some people have had their time, Mr. Speaker. And I have come to realize that it is not so important how long one has served, Mr. Speaker, but what one accomplishes during that time. Mr. Speaker, schools do not suddenly, Minister of Education, schools do not suddenly get to the point of having to be condemned. Buildings deteriorate over time from age, poor maintenance regime, or no maintenance regime at all. Mr. Speaker, in this vein, I also want to inform the House that Foxville now has a CCTV system with monitoring systems in the police station on Foxville Road. The installation of this system was started just ahead of the 2017 general elections and was completed in August 2017. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive to note that Foxville could have had an operational CCTV system about 3 years before the 2017 general elections. After the horrific massacre, which took 4 precious lives on Freedom Park on Friday, 27th of December 2013, the police added Foxville to the list of places where CCTV systems should be installed. Mr. Speaker, the infrastructure for the installation of CCTV systems were installed in the downtown area, in Nassau Village, in Bain and Grantstown, and on the Foxville Parade. The downtown area installation was completed when the cameras and monitoring systems were installed. The Nassau Village installation was completed when the cameras and monitoring systems were installed. The Bain and Grantstown installation was completed when the cameras and monitoring systems were installed. Mr. Speaker, the infrastructure for CCTV was installed on the Foxville Parade at the same time as in the other areas. No cameras were installed on the infrastructure on the Foxville Parade. No monitoring system was set up and installed in the Foxville Police Station. I don't know why Foxville's installation was not completed at the same time as downtown Nassau, Nassau Village, and Bain Town. I don't know. A complete CCTV system didn't come to Foxville until more than 3.5 years later. And just before the 2017 general election. Mr. Speaker, a CCTV system is not a panacea for the eradication of violent crime, but it certainly is a deterrent and identifying powerful tool. But for reasons unknown to me, Foxville was left without the benefit of such a powerful tool for more than 3.5 years. So, Mr. Speaker, when you have the opportunity, the means, and the position of high office, then it behooves us to look after the people's business, so that when we demit office or are removed from office, then we can stand on our record, and our record can speak for us more eloquently and more loudly than press conferences and video releases. And we will not have to constantly engage the public about what needs to be done because we did not do it when we had the opportunity to do so. Mr. Speaker, it is not good enough to suddenly realize that parks need to be cleaned, that some schools need to be condemned and new schools built, that young people need developmental programs, and family islands need to be developed, airports need to be maintained and built. All of these things did not happen on May 10, 2017. They were on May 10, 2017, as they were on May 9, 2017. Mr. Speaker, I listened to and I sympathize with my friend, the Honorable Member for South Andros, as he made his contribution yesterday. The constituency of South Andros should be on par with a place like North Abaco.
Long Island too.
Like North Abaco and Long Island, South Andros should be the prototype of what a family island constituency should be. Foxville should be the prototype of what a heritage constituency should be. I felt South Andros' pain because we have both lived that pain for many years. Mr. Speaker, the village where the first freedman on this island lived does not look like a place that has been loved and cherished. It does not have that North Abaco look about it. Mr. Speaker, perhaps I'm mistaken. Some of us have misunderstood our calling. Perhaps some of us are called to be activists and agitators because that is what we do best. For some of us, our role in life is to call upon others to do the things that we have left undone. Mr. Speaker, when we begin to believe that we are in office forever, or that God gave this country to us, then we might be tempted to believe that we have forever and a day to tease people with drips and drabs and tiny pieces of economic and social advances to keep them where we want them to be. But through the grace of God, every 5 years, the people have their say, and they let us know when enough is enough. Mr. Speaker, we know that we have a covenant with the Bahamian people. And, Mr. Speaker, we will be faithful to that covenant. Mr. Speaker, as outlined in the speech from the throne, all Bahamians are promised a brighter and sustainable future. Speaker, in Foxville, as in other parts of the country, people are anxious to see major positive shifts. They want jobs, Mr. Speaker. They want services that work. They want to feel a lessening of the hardships they've endured over the past 5 years. Mr. Speaker, in short, they want a country that works for them, a country that makes sense to them. It is understandable, Mr. Speaker, that people are anxious, that all the vestiges of 5 long years of privation and denial should be washed away immediately. I can understand. They want to see now where they are going. And so I suggest, along with Golden Gate, that some of the measures that will immediately alleviate the hardships of those experiencing and living through the most difficult times should be implemented immediately. I am saying to you, to the good constituents of Fox Hill, do not lose heart. Do not be discouraged. The journey to a better Bahamas is only in its infancy, and good, better, best is coming to Fox Hill. Mr. Speaker, the constituency of Fox Hill is a mix of several demographics. The various communities run the gamut from middle class to poverty-stricken to sadly and badly neglected. And Mr. Speaker, I have always believed in the potential of our country in general and the vast and untapped economic potential of the Fox Hill constituency in particular. My primary job in this honorable place is to vigorously and faithfully represent the good people of Fox Hill so that we do have good, better, best. I believe the promised initiatives of our government will take hold and will make a substantial difference, and we are anxious to get some major projects started. Mr. Speaker, the constituency of Fox Hill waits with bated breath. Mr. Speaker, our government will have the opportunity to make a deep and profound change to our heritage communities. We will not spoon-feed those communities in drips and drabs just to have them hanging on a promise. Drips and drabs have been the experience of Fox Hill over the last 50 years, and certainly in the last 15 years. Fox Hill, in spite of being an historical and cultural powerhouse, has led the national development alongside other heritage communities. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention to agitate and to fight and to cause the historical, cultural, and natural attributes of Fox Hill to be used for the economic, social, and personal benefit of the people of the Fox Hill constituency. Mr. Speaker, you cannot imagine how it warmed my heart when Her Excellency read this speech, this passage in the speech from the throne, and I quote, "All Bahamians are entitled to an acceptable standard of living, ready access to essential services, and livable physical environments. My government is deeply aware of poverty, especially in heritage communities of Nassau, and is determined to eradicate the in-your-face physical conditions that demean the dignity of our people." Her Excellency went further to say, "Accordingly, my government will institute urban development by revitalizing heritage communities and expanding the reach of social services," end quote. Mr. Speaker, our government, this government, has an excellent opportunity to write the definitive manual on what it means to really and truly put Bahamians first. For example, Mr. Speaker, we are in the tail end of the hurricane and rainy season. Yesterday, it rained practically all day. If you took a drive down Burnett Road, if you took a ride along Foxville Road, if you drove through Dorset Street, through Passion Avenue and Eastwood, Kildare Drive and Monastery Park, or if you tried to get to the Urban Renewal Office on Springfield Road, you will find that these areas were flooded and impassable, except by car. Mr. Speaker, Fox Hill is a walking community. Most areas of it, a walking community. Mothers send children to the shop, children walk to school, people walk to church, and children walk to parks. And so, Mr. Speaker, when it rains, like it did yesterday, and when the walking public has to take a detour, which invariably means a longer route to get to the same destination. Mr. Speaker, I am spending time on this particular issue because the urgent resolution of this matter is important to the people of the Foxville constituency, and they told me to get it fixed. And Mr. Speaker, if nothing else, I know who my bosses are. Mr. Speaker, yes, the poor drainage system is an old problem, and yes, those who claim to love the people of Foxville so much should have fixed the drainage problem. 15 years is more than sufficient time. I agree. But I am here now, and I am asking that with the utmost urgency, we fix this problem. When we do this, Bahamians generally, and the Foxville constituency in particular, will see and feel the care that this government has for them. Mr. Speaker, when we fix these simple and fairly easy things, then we positively impact the quality of life of the most disenfranchised among us. And people, at a very basic level, feel that they have been placed first. Mr. Speaker, during a press conference in August to launch our annual Foxville Day Heritage Festival, a reporter asked me how it felt to be the member of Parliament for one of the crime spots in this country. He didn't ask me how it felt to be the member of Parliament for a community that has given so much to this country. And this is a drumbeat that I will continue to sound until I can sound it no more. I am the member of Parliament for a community that has given the Bahamas a central bank governor, world-acclaimed fine artists, world-acclaimed musicians, world-acclaimed athletes, the first ladies to begin the straw market, nationally acclaimed patriots, and national nation builders, and the list goes on and on. Nevertheless, Mr. Speaker, I was more than delighted that one interview brought some positive things to the constituency. Basketball teams from the University of Rhode Island and Boston University brought their programs to the children of Foxville. The Pan American Health Organization and the World Health Organization, in conjunction with the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Culture, by deliberate choice, observed International Youth Day at our community center in Foxville, and more than 100 children pledged to be peace ambassadors. And we were very busy over the summer, Mr. Speaker. The start of a girls' club was delayed by the passage of Hurricanes Irma and Maria. A holistic program to improve the education and social growth of students with the lowest grade point averages will be launched this month. In conjunction with the police and urban renewal, we held a community hurricane preparedness meeting at our community center. All contingencies were covered. We are grateful to the Kiwanis Club of Foxville that provided sand on Freedom Park that augmented the sand that we provided at the constituency office. We visited all 3 hurricane shelters, and while we are very grateful for the care and attention shown to those who went to the shelters, we look at the setup at the Kendall Isaacs Gym and Loyola Hall as blueprints for all hurricane shelters. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we carried out a considerable amount of work during the summer, and along with the police, we wanted to assure the country that Foxville was indeed a safe and wonderful place to come to experience and enjoy our annual Emancipation and Foxville Day Heritage festivities. With a team from the police, the festival committee, and the young people's arm of the committee, we presented a fabulous heritage festival with many new and participative activities for patrons. The perennial greasy pole was a strong draw. The reenactment of a slave ship dropping off its cargo through to the eventual Emancipation Proclamation was a glimpse of history that many marveled over. The mango, dilly, watermelon, and pineapple eating contests provided fun and laughter for many. The crab release and catch contest sweetened many pots in the days following the festival. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, no one entered the ugliest man contest, so we had to scrap that one. The ecumenical and church visitation services are a well-entrenched staple. Boxcart rides, an artifacts exhibit which included a 140-year-old wedding dress, a youth seminar, and a heritage bus tour reminded many of the culture that we sometimes tend to forget. Freedom Bus and Freedom Harmony Choir, yours truly, being the energetic choir director, rolled through Fox Hill and delighted audiences, including the leader of the opposition, at 5 Baptist churches during their annual children's program. All of this, Mr. Speaker, combined and made for a wildly successful and enjoyable Fox Hill Heritage Festival. Mr. Speaker, our Back to School program was done in a targeted and specific way so that those who were most in need would benefit. For all the children, we had an end-of-summer splash at the community center pool. Hot dogs, hamburgers, popcorn, and drinks were provided for children, and chicken on the grill for grown-ups. Mr. Speaker, I must have toted on my back and carried in my arms over 30 children who could not swim and were too small to stand in the 4-foot deep pool. But they wanted to enjoy the pool like everyone else. This speaks to the need for swimming lessons in all of our schools. We are currently working on this program with 2 different teams of instructors. We provided backpacks and school uniforms for families that were in urgent need. A day of hair braiding for girls and haircuts for boys included a fun and enjoyable game of hopscotch under the dilly tree. Mr. Speaker, greeting students at Sandilands Primary School and speaking to the assembly at Doris Johnson High School was an exciting and hopeful start to the school year. Sandilands Primary School was our first stop, and of course, the children don't let you go. So when we were done at Sandilands Primary School, we made our way to Doris Johnson Senior High School. At first, on seeing us, the students of Doris Johnson Senior High School let out a collective groan. They could not believe that they had just heard from the honorable member for Yamacraw, and now here comes another member of Parliament. But we got over that and had a delightful kickoff to the school year. The Homework Assistance Program, headed by the Parish Church of St. Anne's and assisted by volunteer teachers, was approved by the Board of the Community Center and should be ready to begin in a few days. We still need some tables. We still need some tables. We still need some tables for students to work at, but otherwise all is ready. St. Paul's Baptist Church is still on track with its free BJC and BGC SC classes. Mr. Speaker, we had an incredibly busy and productive summer in Fox Hill. Time does not permit me to go into all of the things we did in the community. Suffice it to say that we were present and our tentacles reached out in all directions. Mr. Speaker, I have been appointed chairman of the Clifton Heritage Authority. The park occupies 208 acres on the southwestern end of the island. Mr. Speaker, the mission and the purpose of Clifton Heritage Authority is to develop and operate a national heritage park that is of national and international significance. The authority is charged with preserving and promoting the historical, cultural, and natural heritage of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the authority is also responsible for developing and operating programs to further things that we did in the community. The preservation, research, management, interpretation, and promotion of Clifton heritage sites, monuments, and artifacts in cooperation with national and international organizations of the highest expertise. Mr. Speaker, Clifton Heritage Authority is further responsible for the conduct of archaeological investigations, for developing a sustainable economic and environmental plan, and encouraging public interest in the history of the Bahamas through research, teaching, volunteerism, museum, marketing, and interpretive programs. Mr. Speaker, Hurricane Matthew blew through and swept through Clifton Heritage National Park in October 2016 and damaged and or destroyed flora, fauna, and infrastructure. The Ministry of Tourism has kindly provided space for administrative and accounting personnel at its downtown offices since Hurricane Matthew. Suffice to say that there is much work to be done to complete the recovery from the ravages of Hurricane Matthew and to realign the operation and focus of the park. Mr. Speaker, I would like to register my agreement with the plan put forth by the Prime Minister to help our Dominican sisters and brothers. This was an easy one for me, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker, my grandmother cooked a sweet Sunday dinner pot. All the cousins came to dinner. And as faithful as clockwork, along would come Miss Brown, just as Mama was dishing up. So, of course, Miss Brown had to be served before us children. And we were always upset and annoyed at how this woman could always find herself at our grandmother's house to cut us short of our Sunday dinner. That was just enough for us. We didn't like Miss Brown, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, we all ate. And as children, we never really realized that we were never left hungry. We didn't know how Mama worked it so that we all had enough to eat. That lesson was learned late in life. And it applies now, Mr. Speaker, that we must help our neighbor and that we must at the same time ensure that all Bahamians will know that there will still be enough for them as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I bring my contribution to this debate to an end, adding my voice to the refrain that thanks the Governor General for the clarity and the grace with which she delivered the speech from the throne. God bless Fox Hill. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And may we continue to be blessed through November 30th and beyond.
As many.
No fee.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
I want to thank Michael. Mr. Speaker, I arise today giving all praise and thanks, as I usually do, to the Lord of life, the Lord of heaven and earth. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the ancient Hebrews called him Yahweh Elohim, and we translate it to mean the Lord God Almighty. And so I thank him for my presence in this place. For I truly believe, Mr. Speaker, that it is through his express will that I occupy this seat in this parliament. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the great constituents of Bamboo Town, the majority of whom, by the grace and favor of the good Lord, voted for me in overwhelming numbers. Mr. Speaker, I garnered nearly 60% of the total vote in that constituency. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank him, and I thank them for the privilege to further serve. Mr. Speaker, I would like my constituents to know that the team Wells trained that was so effective during the campaign has transitioned, and the office that they frequent has now become the constituency office. where all constituents know that they are welcome, Mr. Speaker, and indeed our doors never closed. Mr. Speaker, in fact, during the time of the threat of Hurricane Irma, we had the opportunity to deliver sand on the Kennedy Park for distribution in the area of Kennedy. And we also delivered sand in the area of the headquarters by another park, Four Quarters Park, for the other side of Bamboo Town. I have a little issue there. You know, the people of Kennedy don't necessarily consider themselves to be a part of Bamboo Town. So what I do over in Bamboo, I have to do over in Kennedy. Mr. Speaker, our team has also taken to the streets in the recent months where we have undertaken initiatives such as tree trimming, yard cleaning, and the clearing of clogged drains throughout the constituency of Bamboo Town. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Honorable Minister of Works, the member for Carmichael, for the Ministry of Works team that has been working diligently to assist in the cleaning of those drains. I am most grateful. Mr. Speaker, moreover, I purchased some 800 school bags for distributions to persons within the community who found themselves economically challenged. And, Mr. Speaker, this is the first time in 5 years because I found myself over the past 2 years, as is evident in the papers, economically challenged. But I ain't gonna touch that just yet. But it's the first time, Mr. Speaker, in 5 years that I was not able to hold that signature event in Bamboo Town, the Bamboo Town Back to School Bash, where typically, as was said by the member for Southern Shores, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 persons show up on that Saturday to participate in our event. The cupboards was bare after a bruising political campaign. Mr. Speaker, also during the summer recess, I took the time to sponsor a local basketball tournament where my team, the Bamboo Town Engineers, it did fairly well. And so, I'm not going to tell the tale of the tape. But, Mr. Speaker, I want the people of Bamboo Town to know that I will continue to represent their interests in this place, Mr. Speaker, to the best of my ability. I will seek to voice their views and their values from this place. Mr. Speaker, my very first contribution in this place was in June of 2012. And it was on the occasion of a resolution to thank the then Governor General for the speech from the throne. So, Mr. Speaker, similarly, I thank the current Governor General, Her Excellency Dame Marguerite, on her most magnificent, regal, illustrious, poised, eloquent, effervescent delivery of the speech from the throne on May 24th of this year in Parliament Square, the People's Square. But you know, Mr. Speaker, we expected no less from the matriarch of this great nation, who for the past 60 years has been and has played a pivotal role and been an integral part of the events and happenings of our national life. Mr. Speaker, nothing less could have been expected from the lady from the South, South Andros, Long Bay Keys, the Deep South, the Big Yard. Mr. Speaker, I am proud that my heritage hails from the Deep South. And you know, Mr. Speaker, there's a song that speaks about the overall attitude of the people of Andros. It says, Andros Island is big and long. The things that grow there will make you strong. The cat and the dog and even bullfrog eating crab fat and calling it that. That song, Mr. Speaker, for me, speaks to the character, as Soka would say, the member from South Andros would say, it speaks to the character, strength, and resilience of the people of Andros, and of course, by extension, South Andros, from which she hails. That strength, Mr. Speaker, comes from never having really lost the common touch, something all of us in political life should learn from. It comes from taking part in the simple pleasures of life. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the song says, eating the simple things of crab fat and calling it that. Mr. Speaker, Her Excellency delivered a resounding message of hope. As she spoke, Mr. Speaker, I could not help but recall the last speech from the throne, which was given by Sir Arthur Folkes, who also resounded a message of hope for the Bahamian people. That message of hope in 2012, Mr. Speaker, was about putting Bahamians first. That message was about believing in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, during that debate in 2012, during that contribution on that resolution, the first time I stood in this place, and to thank the wonderful people of Bamboo Town who had elected me at that point in time with 39.2% of the vote. I took the opportunity to tell the Bahamian people and Bamboo Town again about the causes that I believe I came to this place to champion over the 5 years for which they had elected me. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, the causes that I would continue to champion for however long. For however long the Lord, Mr. Speaker. And I want to reiterate that for some persons. I can get to that later. For however long the Lord determines my political life will be. Mr. Speaker, for however long the Lord determines my political life will be. You know, Mr. Speaker, as I stood here on May 24th of this year, I heard a similar message of hope. The message resonated from our government. That message was, it is the people's time. You see, Mr. Speaker, one spoke about putting people first. This one spoke about, it's the people's time. Similar messages, one thread and theme. There is a nexus in those messages, Mr. Speaker. The nexus is that of elevating people's hopes and dreams to be fully actualized and realized in the economic and political life of this nation. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamian people, having heard the message of hope in 2012, I believe they judged that message over the past 5 years. And the verdict, Mr. Speaker, by the Bahamian people on that message is the reason why we are elected and the Free National Movement is now the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. What else do you expect, given that scenario? I believe that the hopes, the dreams, and the aspirations so eloquently articulated in 2012 were not realized by the Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's an old adage that says the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And believe you me, Mr. Speaker, when the Bahamian people ate, they did not digest that pudding well. Indeed, the inability of the previous administration to deliver on its promises resulted in our march directly into the halls, into these lofty halls of power, Mr. Speaker. What else would you expect, Mr. Speaker? The good book says, hope defers makes the heart sick, but hope fulfilled is a tree of life. Proverbs 13 and 12. I want the Bahamian people to know that we, unlike the last administration, is not going to defer their hopes and their dreams and aspirations. This administration, Mr. Speaker, will deliver for them. Mr. Speaker, as I took to the floor in 2012, I spoke about 5 areas, and they have informed my political life. Those 5 areas, Mr. Speaker, is one of food security, energy security, a knowledge-based economy with 21st century, 22nd century education, a deepening of this, our democracy, an economic empowerment for the Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker, where they own the upper tiers of this economy, Mr. Speaker, the upper tiers of banking and tourism. Mr. Speaker, I will fight until the Lord decides for me no longer to share the breath that he gave mine, to see those 5 things realized in the economy of this country, in this nation. Mr. Speaker, I believe, and I believe if others do not, that God directs my every move. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is no longer curious to me that the Prime Minister has made me responsible for 2 of my most valued concerns. Benjamin Franklin says, I've lived long, and the longer I live, the more I am convinced that God governs in the affairs of men. As Minister of Agriculture and Marine Resource, I have responsibility for food security. And as leader of government business in this place, I am able to further deepen this democracy through judicious collaboration with the side opposite, yourself, Mr. Speaker, the clerk. Collectively together, all of us, Mr. Speaker, will move the government's agenda forward in this term. For indeed, Mr. Speaker, Article 52 of the Constitution says that this Parliament is established to create laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the Bahamas. And during this term in office, we will do just that. Mr. Speaker, let me speak a little bit of the remit given to me by the Honorable Prime Minister in the area of food security. Mr. Speaker, it is with great consternation that I think of what would happen to us if we did not get some food shipments in here in 3 weeks. Mr. Speaker, we spend probably $1.3 billion on food imports every year. And we need to do more in terms of educating our people of the importance of growing our own food and learning to consume what we grow. We need to do more by putting a dent in the import bill in general. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am sending out a clarion call to everyone in this country, as well as they are able, to begin producing. You can begin with very basic steps by designating a space in your yard, on your porch, or even in your kitchen. You can grow herbs in small potted plants. Yeah, that ain't... South Beach said I can explain that herb. That ain't that herb. That's the herb. That's the herbs for the pot. Well, you know, boy, I just put my foot in my mouth, eh?
Herbs for seasoning and cooking.
Exactly. I might add, Mr. Speaker, that my ministry is able to provide seedlings at a very affordable rate, and not that kind of seedling, to assist you should you choose to grow. It is my intention to have Bahamians eat as much of their food from locally grown sources. This would allow us to eat food that is closer to its nutritional source, which is more beneficial and has the potential to reduce our national high level of non-communicable diseases, and as was spoken of by the member from Elizabeth, the Honorable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, I believe in the Bahamas that we don't grow because we don't know. You know, since assuming carriage of this portfolio, Mr. Speaker, I was pleasantly surprised to know the extent to which my ministry goes to encourage local producers, both in crop and livestock. Mr. Speaker, we do so by offering vast extension services with agricultural extension officers whose responsibility it is to come to your farm and designate how much you're growing, help you with crop rotation, teach you how to fertilize if you're having issues. Mr. Speaker, we go so far as to assist with land clearance with tractors, where the government shares the cost with the farmer, 50-50, whatever the cost was to clear down that land, and we have spent in excess of almost $1 million buying D8s for the government to assist farmers or those interested in commercial farms to help clear down their lands. Mr. Speaker, we have a fish and farm store where we provide feed, seed, fertilizers for the agricultural industry. And as I toured the Ministry of Agriculture, I found that we've got these two large edifices, these big, beautiful buildings called the animal feed mill. One completely run down, the other chugging along, where we provide feed to the entire country for livestock and poultry. But you know, Mr. Speaker, in spite of all of these things, we lag behind. But you know, Mr. Speaker, I am committed to putting in place in 2 years no chicken imports into this country. Mr. Speaker, I want to increase the number of greenhouses producing fruits and vegetables in this country because I believe for us it is a must. Mr. Speaker, Bahamians are among the highest per capita consumption of poultry, chicken in the world. We seem to eat more chicken than any other nationality on the planet. I am advised that we are tipping the scales near 100 pounds of chicken per person per year. Yet only one chicken farm, Abaco Big Bird, remains open today. 90% of the chicken being consumed by Bahamians is being imported from as far away as Brazil, where some say it may have been on ice for a year or two before it even enters the Bahamian market. You see, Mr. Speaker, this is one example of the vast potential that exists in this country to radically effect change for a more buoyant and robust economy. We must address that issue. And Mr. Speaker, Lord willing, I will. Mr. Speaker, our government is cognizant of the impact of the recent hurricanes, namely Hurricane Matthew and Hurricane Irma, and the effect it has had on the farming and fishing communities of the Bahamas. In New Providence and in Grand Bahama, North Andros, Exuma, they have been affected by Hurricane Matthew. And the fishermen, Mr. Speaker, were issued for Hurricane Matthew coupons totaling in the amount of $104,600. So the fishermen, Mr. Speaker, for Hurricane Matthew received some monies from the government of the Bahamas. But the farmers did not. They didn't really receive any tangible relief. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is my ministry's intent to assist farmers impacted by Hurricane Matthew and Irma by giving a direct monetary assistance that's in our budget, providing much-needed fencing and land clearing to small, medium, and large-scale farmers, similarly to those fishermen impacted by Hurricane Irma, where they reside in the southeasterly islands or fishing that area. Those persons, Mr. Speaker, will also be considered. Mr. Speaker, an exigency order. Exigency order. I got the problem with Prime Minister from time to time, but he says he get tied out. Is now in place to allow fishermen to bring their fishing traps, condos, and other fishing devices, equipment, to purchase them and bring them in duty-free and VAT-free into the country. That exigency order was tabled by the Minister of Finance here today. And this, we hope, will help the fishing industry recover in the shortest possible time. Mr. Speaker, our government will also look into how best we can assist farmers and fishermen with securing soft loans so that they can get back into the industry, they can get on their feet, and they can once again become great contributors to the economic life of this country. Mr. Speaker, let me touch a matter that has been bantering back and forth in the news, and it ain't my electricity bill. It is the matter of me simply saying that perhaps we will extend the grouper season, depending on how you want to talk about it, or we will shorten the close season, to give fishermen who lost the opportunity for revenue during the crawfish season to recoup some of the monies that they would have lost. And I said it was only this season, but I have been somewhat, which is a nice word, in social media and in the newspapers by NGOs and others who come after me viciously. And all I have to say, Mr. Speaker, is this. Listen, the fishing community approached me as to that being an option. I said perhaps it was an option. We will engage, if you go back to my comments, I said we would engage with civil society and NGOs, and we'll try to make a decision as to the way forward. And I learned a valuable lesson about speaking out of turn. And so, Mr. Speaker, rather than taking on that fight at this time, we will seek to assist the fishermen in other ways. Mr. Speaker, farmers in low-lying areas that were flooded and receive extensive damage to their farms and roadways, as well as saltwater intrusion in New Providence during Hurricane Matthew, in particular Bonefish Pond allotment, will be provided with extensive roads works so that they will be able to have access to their farms down in the Bonefish Pond area. Mr. Speaker, we will also assist them with land preparation via tractors in order to alleviate the salt intrusion caused by the water surge of Hurricane Matthew. We're going to help them disc up their soil. Mr. Speaker, we also have in storage, and I found that it's been there for quite some time. We also have in storage to be distributed shortly to all registered farmers and designated farming inclined institutions such as Simpson Penn and William A. Pratt Center, several types of fertilizers which was donated to us from the government of Morocco. And Mr. Speaker, my ministry will give it to the farming community at no cost. further, Mr. Speaker, in order for us to maximize our natural resources to the benefit of the Bahamian people, we have begun looking at the use of aragonite and sand, which we understand is good for the revitalization of the soil for farming. And in the near future, my ministry will be looking at how we can assist farmers with this concept and this initiative. Mr. Speaker, I will now move to the area of marine resource. You know, Mr. Speaker, for the past 2 decades, we have seen the rise of what was called the green economy, where people talked about healthy eating, renewable energy, eco-friendly products, so on and so on. Now, Mr. Speaker, the world is seeing from a global perspective the birth of what is now being called the blue economy. This is where the Bahamas stands to gain so very much. Our country's hallmark, the ocean, will serve us well in the decades to come if we manage it properly. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is indeed blue, with more than 100,000 square miles of ocean and a pristine marine environment. The blue economy seeks to manage the ocean's resources to the benefit of the Bahamians and to the benefit of humanity. Our marine resources, Mr. Speaker, currently carry the weight in our country's export, with over 100 million being earned from that ocean, from our marine life. 70 to 80 million of that is in spiny lobster or crawfish alone, while the remainder is in the sale of stone crab, grouper, and other marine life. Mr. Speaker, it is my intention in about 2 years to see that figure move from 100 million to 200 million to 300 million, Mr. Speaker. The opportunities are so vast to increase our manufacturing and production capacity. First, to supply ourselves, and then to begin to export to the world. Mr. Speaker, in this way, agriculture and fisheries stand to decrease unemployment, which lends itself to a reduction in crime rates. And it has the power, Mr. Speaker, to create a healthier nation of people who are eating off their own land and their own sea. Our country stands like a lighthouse, Mr. Speaker, for the world in marine and agro-tourism and culture. It stands to increase our individual earning power. And this whole concept of how we manage our blue economy can do so much more. Mr. Speaker, we must be reminded that east of Cat Island and Eleuthera and Abaco, for 200 nautical miles, and some say even 3, is our exclusive economic zone out into the Atlantic Ocean, Mr. Speaker. It is Bahamian sovereign territory, protected by international law. This country has so much untapped potential in that area that the future is bright. Indeed, at the recent ACP conference, the conference provided this when fisheries experts from around the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific nations deemed that the Bahamas, as a result of our exclusive economic zone, is underfished in regards to certain marine species, which indicates our vast potential. Mr. Speaker, I was pleased that the government of the Bahamas recently hosted the ACP, the African, Caribbean, and Pacific States Ministers with responsibilities for fisheries and aquaculture, on the 18th and 21st of September here at Malia in Nassau. The conference focused on building in the fisheries and aquacultural sector. And Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to serve as chair, where some 140 delegates attended. The conference was said to have been a great success. And during the deliberation, several achievements took place, such as the Blue Fund Initiative, where the ACP will now create a blue fund of some 40 million euros. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to see to it that the Bahamas gets its fair share. The next conference of the ACP, Mr. Speaker, is going to be held in Samoa. And I look forward, if the Prime Minister still has me in this place, as to attending that conference in Samoa. Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, on that note, let me say how happy I am to recognize the work that has been done in this Parliament during the recess. As such, I see renovations to the interior design. Viewers would recall that the law books were located in front of the Speaker. They are now located on both sides for easy access by members of the aisle. Mr. Speaker, we've put water tables on both sides of the aisle. We have put new carpeting in the Parliament. We've given this place a fresh coat of paint. Mr. Speaker, the cafeteria, the smokers' room, now has new furniture. It has the addition of a mirror that some who was in here in the past had requested. So we could take a look at ourselves before we enter this place again, to ensure that we are prepared for this theater of Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, we've also done some renovations downstairs in both the minority and the majority rooms. What I would like to say, Mr. Speaker, further, and what I would like to see, Mr. Speaker, is a new Parliament, as was spoken to. Parliament building.
I guess I can bang on the table for that one.
That's why I love Southern Shores. He's there to make sure I don't slip up. Mr. Speaker, a new Parliament building, as was spoken to by the member for Tall Pines, and other members who, interestingly enough, would have occupied this space in the last Parliament. And I'm hoping, Mr. Speaker, that in this term, we will break ground for a new building that will be, once completed, an expression of our culture, our hopes, our dreams, and our aspirations as a people. Mr. Speaker, I also have a desire to see this Parliament become more independent of the executive and the cabinet of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, I believe that you should be a cooperation soul in whom is vested all of the buildings, the budget, and the powers of this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, and I believe that that is what is intended in our Constitution, that this Parliament should be the third co-equal branch of this Westminster system, this government we have. Mr. Speaker, it was Isaiah who penned that the Lord is judge, the judiciary. He is king, the executive. He is lawgiver, the parliament and legislature. And many Western thinkers like Locke and Hume, having experience with human kings holding all three of those powers, began to agitate that no one man could have those powers and be fair. So in Western democracies, those governed by Judeo-Christian principles, they began to think about how they separate those powers and have co-equal branches, all of which were supposed to watch the other to ensure that the general public, the people, would have gotten fairness. Because it was said by Locke that only one person in all of creation could possess those three entities and never make a mistake. That is God alone. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to see this Parliament become what the Western thinkers fought for and died for, which is an independent, co-equal branch of the government of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, you know, young Bahamians with bright minds also must be given opportunities to explore the field that is destined to become our breadbasket, agricultural and marine resource. And I am intent, Mr. Speaker, on feeding them with the knowledge and opportunities to fulfill those dreams. But before I close, Mr. Speaker, I wish to extend, and I take this opportunity to extend my sincere thanks to the entire staff of the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, Mr. Speaker, and all of the agencies for which I have responsibility. They have greatly assisted me in making a smooth transition to a new portfolio. And I look forward to our work ahead, and I'm sure that with the guidance of Almighty God, we will accomplish great things for and on behalf of the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank again Her Excellency the Governor General for again delivering such a poised and magnificent speech. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I would be a little remiss if I was to take my seat in this place and not at least pay homage to a man who stood in this place, passed on during the recess. That is the Honorable Dr. Bernard Nottage. Mr. Speaker, Dr. Nottage, though he and I had a contentious mentor love-hate relationship, did an awful lot to mentor me as a young man, and indeed his life, my life, I would say, Mr. Speaker, in many ways mirrored his. He was an avid athlete who competed for the Bahamas in the Olympic Games. I was an avid athlete who competed for the Bahamas in the Olympic Games. He was a man of science and math. He became a doctor. I somewhat good in science, somewhat good in math. I became an engineer, scientist nonetheless. He ended, you got it right, he ended up in this parliament later on, political life. I have ended up in this parliament, political life. He held this job as leader of government business in the House, the last parliament. I now hold this job as leader of government business in the House. He left. Well, I ain't going there. I can stay away from that one. I can stay away from that. But, Mr. Speaker, he was a wonderful mentor. He was a wonderful mentor. And I learned so much from him. Because indeed, in the last parliament, Mr. Speaker, I was a deputy whip. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it was during a very trying time in my time in this parliament. Boy, you know, Mr. Speaker, I said I wasn't going to go there. But it was during a very trying time in this parliament. He could see the stress that I was under. And he called me to his office. And Mr. Speaker, he spoke to me as a father would a son. And you know, Mr. Speaker, his point was that don't mind the naysayers. And as the member for Cat Island would have spoken to, don't mind your detractors. Because you see, Mr. Speaker, I got someone there who say, they surprised I got into the cabinet of the Bahamas. I'm not worthy. You see, Mr. Speaker, I understand that there are some who've taken dibs that I won't even last this administration. Some who are quite powerful. But I want to remind them, Mr. Speaker, that there were some other powerful people. I stood over there and spoke that my faith, F-A-T-E, will be determined by God in whom I put my faith, Mr. Speaker. I want them to know, as David said in Psalm 27, that the Lord is my light and my salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that when the wicked, even mine enemies, and my foes came up to eat my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Mr. Speaker, the door host should encamped against me. My heart shall not fail. Though war should rise against me, Mr. Speaker, and I've been through it, in this will I be confident, that one thing that I desire of the Lord, and I've said it in this place, and that will I seek after, Mr. Speaker, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. And Mr. Speaker, I want them to know that I'm not worried, I'm not tired, Mr. Speaker, because the good book said, you should not grow weary in doing well, for in due season you will reap a reward if you think. If you think not, Mr. Speaker, and I can hear in my mind's eye, Mr. Speaker, this is passionate for me, because I've seen the editorial and I've heard the comments and I've seen the social media, Mr. Speaker. I want them to know, Mr. Speaker, I could hear the words of my belated, my grandma who's passed on and my mom singing together. The song of Reverend James Cleveland, who said, I don't feel nowhere as tired. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that this road would be easy. I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, he brought me this far to leave me.
Honorable member, without entering the debate, let me endorse those final sentiments expressed. Because normally, when you are on a course of greatness, you will gain resistance. Actually, the Bible tells us, you know, if you are not persecuted, it is very likely that you are on the path with the devil. Persecutions come to those who are on the path of God. And I would also like to endorse the concept of a new parliament, the separation of powers, and the autonomy of the legislature. I wondered too, when I took this seat, how it was able, the legislature was able to degenerate to be existing as a branch of the executive. That is not good. All of the philosophers who went ahead of us recognized that you need that separation to have that check and balance in the system. And I'm so happy that you raised that matter on the floor, which will be beneficial to both sides. And, of course, I would be championing that cause from the chair. And I would invite all the members, particularly those in the executive, because, you know, when you have seized power, it is difficult to relinquish it. Those in the executive to be mindful of the system upon which this parliament is built. Because when a system is designed to function in a particular way, and you destroy an element of that system will malfunction. It's almost like pouring Kool-Aid in your gas tank and expect that vehicle to run. And so we want to initiate this transformation through the parliamentary channel. Because as this government moves ahead on a mission of accountability and transparency, we must set the foundation in the society so that the people can be educated to make us accountable and to make us transparent. So right now, this society is degenerated into a society of give me, lend me, have you any, can you spare me? Everything, and persons in this society want something for nothing. They want success without process. And we have to change that. if we are going to advance as a people. That is why we have so much difficulty in this society with the foreigners who come into this society. They come and they look for work and they find a job. Bahamians looking for a job and don't want to work. And I tell my constituents all the time, don't expect me to write a letter on your behalf if you haven't made an application. Look for work and you'll find a job. As many?
Mr. Speaker, I yield you my time. Or the balance.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for North Eleuthera.
You know, after the previous speaker, the honorable member, Mr. Wells, if we were in church, yeah, that's Mr. Wells, that's Brentwood Wells, Bembletown, the honorable member. If we were in church, we'd say, well, we could go home now. We done heard the message. I am indeed privileged to be here and to thank those persons that are responsible for me to get to this place today. Mr. Speaker, I will try not to make the mistake I made the last time when I spoke in this honorable place. I have the distinction, so I've been told, to have offered my contribution with only saying, addressing the Speaker just but once. So, Mr. Speaker, I will endeavor to do better. Mr. Speaker, her grace, her eloquence, and the announcement of our agenda can and will only be matched by the execution of excellence in the delivery of our plan. Most humble and gracious Dame Marguerite Pinlan, we thank you for that rendering of our speech from the throne. I want to take the time to thank the people from the great constituency of North Eleuthera for affording me the opportunity to come and to speak on their behalf in this honorable house. I also want to give special recognition to my wife, who now have to do the work that I used to do. And she does it so gracefully. In fact, like my colleague said, she does even a better job than me. But I take serious the charge and the challenge that the people of North Eleuthera have placed in me in seeking to have their needs addressed, their dreams met, and their desires fulfilled. But I thank Almighty God, who enables me to be able to get up each and every day and try and to accomplish the task that is now before me. And in thanking Dame Marguerite for articulating our course so that even the least of us now find themselves equal to all of us, because it is now truly the people's time. Many of our cabinet ministers have all articulated the plans and the visions of this government and what is about to be done by this administration to move this country forward. And so, that being the case, I will address my attention to the constituency of North Eleuthera and the many things that we would like to see accomplished. And those things will be done because the people of North Eleuthera is depending on this government, because we have told them it is their time, the people's time. I look to Gregory Town, and the issue there is the primary school where the young people there have had to meet in a large hall for many, many years. And I was fortunate to accompany the Minister of Education to there several weeks back. And we met with the constituents of Gregory Town in a town hall meeting at which we addressed that issue, that vexing issue that has existed for over 5-6 years. And we were assured that the primary school for Gregory Town will be constructed. We met with the people there for the purpose of deciding once and for all if we were going to renovate the old school that was damaged in a previous hurricane, or we were going to build a new school. It was a consensus of the people that they wanted a new school at a new location. I am happy to say that that wish we now move to fulfill. No longer than today, I spoke with the Minister of Education, who has assured us that while there has been a delay, they will not be denied. The primary school in Gregory Town is on the way. In fact, they are only waiting on the plans to be completed. And the fortunate thing about that is that now what used to be a school, through a self-help initiative, it is now being refurbished, renovated for the purpose of a community center. And the people of Gregory Town, and I want to thank Mr. Gregory Thompson and his lovely daughter, who have taken the bull by the horn and are pushing the issue of having that facility made into a multi-purpose community center. And I pledge my support in ensuring that that happens. We go to the Bogs, Lower and Upper Bog. Mr. Speaker, and the concern there is the receipt of Crown land. The issue of Crown land is a problem that is faced throughout the length and breadth of this country. But it becomes more vexing amongst us in the Family Islands. I know many of my colleagues often say, Ricky, you're always talking about the Family Islands, the Family Islands.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker,
keep pushing, bro.
I speak for where my heart is.
Yes.
In the Family Island.
Yeah.
And there must be a greater emphasis put forward in seeing that this is executed. Mr. Speaker, every time I travel home, and every time I come back here to Nassau, there's an additional 2 or 3 applications for persons who seek to have land that they already live on some of whom already built on, to have it regularized. We've got young people who want to establish families and wants an opportunity to build a future with block and concrete. But the only way that they will be afforded this opportunity if they are granted Crown lands. So I say to my colleagues and to my Honorable Prime Minister, with efficiency and speed, help us, help them. We're also looking in the settlements of the bogs, the establishment of a subdivision. Many of you, when you travel to Family Islands, there are homes and businesses along the main roads and nothing in the back. And what that does, Mr. Speaker, if everybody builds on the front road and you can't get to the back, there'll be no development in the back. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're asking to take the initiative and establish, not just in the bogs, but throughout this country, help us establish subdivisions so that young people have an opportunity to build homes for themselves and their families. We often cry about how Nassau is overpopulated. Well, we can help in the depopulation of New Providence by making things more attractive to persons on the Family Island. This, Mr. Speaker, I think will help us greatly in the constituency of North Eleuthera. In the settlement of the Bluff, there's a clinic there that has actually been, the building has been condemned. There was an attempt to relocate to another building. As to why that did not happen, I do not know. However, one of the problems that we experience on the Family Island is that you have, on certain islands, you have multiple townships. And we're trying to set up facilities in all of these townships, government facilities in all of these townships. And the difficulty is you have to double up and triple up sometimes for the same type of services. My case in point, if we were to get I don't want to say a mini hospital because then the price seems gigantic, but if we were to get a health facility on the mainland of North Eleuthera, somewhere in the area between the Bluff and the Bog, and consolidate the facilities, the medical facilities, we wouldn't need a clinic in Bog. We won't need a clinic in Bluff. And we could just have one facility, and all of the staff working at that facility could provide the services for the entire area. And it makes it more efficient, because instead of having to maintain 2 or 3 buildings, you're only maintaining one. And then you could even roster the staff for longer hours. Sometimes I can't understand why at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in Harbor Island and in some of the other townships that you can't register for health services. That's all they're going to take for the day. That is something we need to revisit. But the point I make is that if we consolidate the facilities that we have, the government facilities, Mr. Speaker, it would make things a whole lot easier for us. Then, in the Bluff, we have the issue with the Laura Anderson Primary School. I visited that school during the opening days. And in touring with the principal, Mr. Speaker, we have a school of under 300 kids, but with a bathroom block that only have 2 toilets, 2 for the boys, 2 for the girls. We need to expand that facility. And the principal had asked if we could see how that could be accomplished. I've pledged my support to see that happen, but the problem we have where that building is located is right on the boundary of the property, and the only way that building could be expanded is with the acquisition of some neighboring land. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I do know that the need exists, Mr. Speaker, for the expansion of those bathroom facilities. I am here tonight to speak to these needs for the people of North Eleuthera. And I know we care. And so I know we will find a way to accommodate these many needs. We are challenged with funding. We realize times are tough. But the investment, the need for the investment, exceeds our problem of not having enough money. I would be remiss not to address the problem that we have in Current. It's a small, lovely community. It's a fishing village of sorts, but we have a dock that when the tide goes out, the fishermen have to anchor their boats off and wade in the water. In the summer, that might not be too bad because the water is warm. But in the winter, it gets choppy, and it gets cold, and it gets troublesome. So at some time, I would like for us to think about how we're going to correct this problem, Mr. Speaker, and addressing this issue with the people of Current. And here, then there's something that is dear to my heart. In Current, many of you are aware that last year, November, Mr. Speaker, we had a tragic fire in the Current where a young lady whose mother is like my mother lost her life. And it is believed that had we had a working fire truck in the area, that would not have happened. We need to do better. There's no reason why that we should not have emergency equipment, life-saving equipment on these family islands. There is not a working fire truck from James Siston come north. Now, many of you may not be familiar with Eleuthera, but we're talking about James Siston, Mr. Speaker, Hatchet Bay, Gregory Town, Bogue, Bluff, Current. All of those townships that lack firefighting equipment. Help me help my people, Mr. Speaker. And then there's Spanish Wells, which is a hard-working township. People who believe in striving for the things that they want to make their life better. But there are some needs there in Spanish Wells that exist as well. There's the bridge to Russell Island that has been damaged for many, many years. And even now, it could only allow for single-lane traffic. And they've been asking, and now I'm asking, let us address the need for that bridge so that while we can repair now, if we don't repair now, we will have to replace in the short order. Prevention is better than cure. There's also the roads on the northern side of Spanish Wells that also needs paving. And I bring these to you here because they bring these concerns to me. You know, I got a colleague, a friend, who often tells me, boy, Ricky, you could beg, you know. But it's not for me. It is for them. I see you smiling. That's why I had to comment on that. I'm no omnipotent, Mr. Speaker. But I'm happy, Mr. Speaker, that the fishing industry, which makes up an important part of my constituency, the member for Bamboo Town, have addressed some of the main concerns that they have. And those concerns are also echoed by Long Island. Many of them have been affected by the recent hurricane. And what we have pledged to them today brings to them the relief that they have been longing for. But I gotta be a little greedy. We've asked, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister, and he's granted through that particular ministry duty-free and VAT-free on the equipment necessary for the farming. I'm sorry, fishing. Fishing and farming. Fishing and farming. Well, not the farming, the fishing. But there's been concessions on the farming as well.